This story begins with a question. Has anyone heard of a shared house? In short, it's like a boarding house that doesn't provide food. In fact, I didn't even know what it was until a minute ago. That's how our protagonist, Hanbyo, introduces himself. He has just arrived at the house while on the phone with someone who tells him he arrived much earlier than planned. It is then that Hanbyo mentions that 2 years ago, he moved to Seoul in search of work. He left the room he had been living in because, starting that day, a new chapter would begin for him in a shared house. Curiously, he organized his room over the phone. While talking to his father, he wanted to know why he needed money or how much he needed. He knew they were in trouble because his father had requested another private loan of 8 million won, supposedly for a business. In short, Hanbyo ended up starting a business after hearing his father's excuses. His father wouldn't stop asking him for money to pay off his debts. It wasn't the first or second time this had happened. His father was practically bankrupt. Since the bank no longer granted him loans, he began to turn to other companies, and when the payment deadline arrived, he would ask his son for help again. It was a cycle that repeated over and over again. Hanbyo complained that he hadn't returned the money from the last time and made it clear that from now on he wouldn't help him anymore. He was determined to live with dignity. However, his father tried to convince him that this time things would be different because the product he was investing in was top quality. He claimed it came from his friend, Professor Wang, from the university where he worked. According to him, the profits would be enormous. But for Hanbyo, it all sounded suspicious. Even if the profits increased every day, he wanted to make sure his father would really send him the money. His father, believing his son would lend him more, thanked him and promised to pay him back. But Hanbyo was already tired of cleaning up his mistakes. This would be the last time he would send him the money and cut off all contact until he returned it, although he knew that would never happen. Between unexpected expenses like that and his room's rent, Hanbyo had to take out some loans. It was at that moment, while looking for a student residence near his company, that an advertisement caught his attention. It was for a shared house, 5 minutes from the station, comfortable, and at an affordable price. So we return to the present. A young woman was about to ask our protagonist some questions, expecting honest answers. For her, this conversation was like an interview before moving in. Hanbyo became thoughtful, as he hadn't expected something like this. Noticing his reaction, the girl thought about leaving, assuming he wasn't interested, but he quickly denied it. It wasn't that. He was just surprised that he had to be interviewed to move in. For the young woman, however, it was a logical requirement. After all, if he already lived in the house, he also wouldn't want to share space with someone conflictive, violent, or difficult to deal with. Therefore, it was the landlord's job to make sure to avoid those people beforehand. Hanbyo understood her point, and the interview began. Although he doesn't remember all the questions very well, he felt that many were unnecessary. However, he clearly remembers the last one. The young woman asked him the most important thing, why he wanted to live in a shared house. She admitted that, to be honest, it was much easier to live alone than to share space with a stranger. Hanbyo became thoughtful, but answered honestly. He was in a tight financial situation. Although the place wasn't very big, the location was good, and the rent was affordable, so it suited him quite well. Well, putting that aside, the truth was that more than anything, he was lonely. The girl was surprised, but told Hanbyo that if he was looking for company, the best thing would be to join a club or go to a pub. However, he wasn't referring to that. Due to his part-time job in university, he'd been too busy and didn't have many close friends. Since he normally only went from his house to work, he had no one to talk to. And when he got home, after a long day, the feeling of loneliness became stronger. Something the young woman could understand. With that, she had enough information, so she asked him when he wanted to move in. Hanbyo, in his mind, regretted having said something unnecessary, but was surprised that everything was moving forward smoothly. In any case, things turned out well, and he hoped that from that moment on, everything would get better. A few days passed, and for the first time, he was living with people outside his family. Instead of worrying, he thought he should have higher expectations for his future. At least now, he wouldn't have someone constantly asking him for money, and he would live in a place less lonely than an empty room. He still didn't know what kind of people he would share his new home with, but if the landlord had been so strict in choosing tenants, they probably wouldn't be bad people. Just then, he ran into one of the girls in the house. To his surprise, she was also confused to see him. Hanbyo wondered if the place was really mixed. Maybe he had overlooked that detail. So he asked the girl if she lived there, but she reacted nervously. When she tried to say something, she ended up screaming and exclaiming that she would give him everything she had. She asked if he was a thief or something similar, as she thought he was a robber. Terrified, she asked him to take her money, or whatever he wanted, since many things in the house weren't even hers. Hanbyo tried to calm her down, assuring her that he wasn't a stranger, but she didn't believe him. For her, entering someone's house with what looked like a sharp weapon was exactly what a criminal would do. The fear overwhelmed her so much that she began to cry, convinced that her fate was sealed. It was then that Hanbyo understood that the object he was carrying could look like a sharp weapon, which explained the confusion. However, the girl continued sobbing, saying that she couldn't believe she would die at the hands of a madman, and that if she had known, she wouldn't have worked so hard. Seeing her in that state, Hanbyo tried to calm her down, asking her to listen. He explained that he wasn't a criminal, but a tenant who had just moved in that day. However, she didn't believe him. For her, it made no sense for a man to live in a women's house. Before he could clarify, he felt a kick to the face. When he turned to see who had hit him, he found a new girl, a redhead, who was as God brought her into the world. She told her friend to stop crying and call the police. Noticing Hanbyo's surprised look, the redhead turned to see what his fixed gaze was on. So she changed her mind and told her friend not to call the police, as she would take care of him right then and there. And so it was Hanbyo's first day in the house, which was supposed to be great, ended with him being mistaken for a thief and attacked by a hostile-looking girl, who, as God brought her into the world, hit him without hesitation. Thus began his life in that new home. A month after that terrible encounter, although the misunderstanding had already been cleared up, the people he lived with weren't as unpleasant as they seemed at first, but it wasn't easy to get along with them either. In the end, he decided to stop trying to get along and simply coexist. First, there was the girl who mistook him for a thief, Junseo. He believed she was a university student, but he had never seen her go to school. She always stayed locked in her room, and the few times she came out, she would murmur to herself as if she were possessed. When he tried to talk to her, she would get scared and start babbling, which led him to think she was an ikomori. Then there was the girl who kicked him, Jisoo. She was the same age as him. But no matter what he said, she always answered him with indifference. He didn't know if Jisoo was just rude or if she had attitude problems. In any case, he didn't feel like being her friend. Lastly, there was the owner and administrator of the house, Min, a 35-year-old woman. She apologized for the misunderstanding on the first day. Although it seemed that everything was already clarified, she hoped that everyone would get along and that if any problems arose, they would come to her to solve them. However, Hanbyo still didn't understand why she had been so demanding in the admission interview, especially since the very people she was trying to avoid already lived there. Also, whenever she had the chance, Min would pressure him to become friends with Jisoo and Junseo, being quite insistent, but he didn't know how to handle it. He had already done his best, but he wasn't interested in continuing to try. In the end, he decided to ignore the administrator and simply enjoy living in a place with cheap rent without getting involved with anyone. One day, Jisoo suddenly arrived and asked Hanbyo to go out together. Confused, he replied that he had already eaten, but she, a little annoyed, scolded him to at least listen before answering. Then, without further ado, she handed him an envelope full of bills and told him she would give him money just for being her boyfriend. Both stood in silence, staring at each other. Hanbyo reminded her that she had attacked him as soon as he arrived at the house, and that, in the first place, he didn't even like her. But Jisoo, unfazed, told him that she knew he needed money, so she was willing to give him 1 million won. She knew, thanks to Min, that he lived there for the cheap rent and that he worked on weekends. That's why she proposed that he pretend to be her boyfriend for just one day in exchange for the million. The conditions weren't bad after all. The offer left Hanbyo quite thoughtful, but before answering, he wanted to know why she needed a fake boyfriend. Jisoo, in turn, told him that it wasn't necessary for him to know. At that, he sighed and commented that the fact that she suddenly came in and asked him to pretend to be her boyfriend for such a large amount of money seemed suspicious to him. In his experience, scams always offered ridiculously favorable conditions. The comment annoyed Jisoo, but Hanbyo was not willing to accept without understanding the situation. He asked her to explain or to simply take her money and leave, since he was busy. Jisoo, impressed by his reaction, had no choice but to tell him the truth. In short, she worked at a construction company, and due to the nature of the job, most of her coworkers were older men. However, according to her, they were incredibly rude. Ever since they found out she didn't have a boyfriend, they started doing crazy things. Even the younger workers, as well as the older single ones, began to harass her little by little. To get out of the situation, she hinted that she had a boyfriend, but since it was a lie, one of the older women didn't believe her. Annoyed, Jisoo insisted that she did have a partner, and without thinking, added another lie. Now, to maintain the facade, she needed Hanbyo to help her. He asked her why she didn't ask a friend, but Jisoo said that it was too embarrassing. That made Hanbyo think for a moment. He finally suggested that she hire a fake dating agency, since it would be cheaper and more professional. However, Jisoo felt uncomfortable with the idea. To him, on the other hand, 1,000,001 seemed like too much money for something so simple. Still, Jisoo insisted that there would be no problem as long as he helped her fix her mistake. But for Hanbyo, that felt more like a threat than a request. Jisoo, tired of arguing, asked him directly if he would do it or not. Hanbyo refused and asked her to leave his room. Annoyed, Jisoo wanted to know what the problem was. Although he secretly thought it all came down to the money, she began to explain her plan to him. According to her story, she had told her coworkers that her boyfriend was a hardworking person, so he would pick her up after her shift. It was nothing out of the ordinary. They just had to meet, greet each other sweetly, and leave together. Nothing complicated. Hanbyo, still not convinced, asked her what else they would have to do exactly. Jisoo, convinced that Hanbyo had accepted, took it for granted that he would take the money. However, he assumed that he would only have to greet her like her boyfriend and nothing else. To his surprise, that wasn't enough for her. They were dealing with people who had been in construction for decades, people who were perceptive and cunning, almost like ghosts. If they wanted to deceive them, they would have to do it well. Jisoo explained that she had lied about having a boyfriend, and that if he didn't show up with her the next day, she would be in big trouble. Seeing her concern, Hanbyo thought it was best for her to let it go. But for her, that meant facing more difficulties while he did nothing, something she was not willing to allow. Hanbyo understood the situation. After all, she had paid him, so they had to do things in a big way. With that in mind, he asked her if it would be okay if they kissed in front of everyone. Jisoo looked at him with suspicion and, almost outraged, asked if he was crazy, but Hanbyo insisted that with that, they could make sure they believed them. For her, however, a kiss was something too intimate, although she could accept it if it was only on the cheek. At that moment, Hanbyo remembered that he had never been in a relationship before. He wondered if he could really act like her boyfriend, especially because he had no idea what to do. However, in the past, he had worked part-time as a guest at weddings, so he decided to try what he had seen on those occasions. When he arrived at Jisoo's workplace, he approached her and, with a smile, called her honey, announcing that he had arrived. That made her blush a little, nervously. Jisoo approached him, but her actions were clumsy, something that did not go unnoticed by Hanbyo. Despite that, he continued with the act. However, Jisoo's co-workers didn't seem so convinced. Although she claimed that he was her boyfriend, Hanbyo whispered to her to do her best, as her nervousness made her look suspicious. With no other option, Hanbyo moved in for the kiss, but both realized too late that they ended up kissing on the lips. The guy was in shock, thinking they had agreed to a kiss on the cheek. For her part, Jisoo noticed that she was suddenly kissing him on the lips without wanting to, but they could no longer go back. So, with no other alternative, they continued with the kiss. That was enough to convince Jisoo's co-workers that they were a couple. "That's young love," they commented. By the time the two lovebirds said goodbye, Jisoo's co-workers also believed it was time to go home. When they walked away, Jisoo exploded, yelling at Hanbyo and asking him what he was doing. He, annoyed, reproached her that it was her fault for turning her head at the last moment. After all, they had agreed to a kiss on the cheek, but in the end, the ruse worked. Still, Hanbyo sighed and apologized, acknowledging that she was right to be upset. Before he could continue, Jisoo interrupted him with a "shut up." That irritated Hanbyo, who asked her if she thought he had done it on purpose. In the first place, it was she who suggested they do it. Besides, he had already apologized. On top of that, things turned out exactly as she wanted, so what was her problem? Jisoo, still embarrassed, murmured a single word. "First." Then, with a trembling voice, she added that it had been her first kiss. Hanbyo was shocked. Suddenly, Jisoo's eyes began to fill with tears. He panicked, not knowing what to do. He had no idea that it had been her first kiss, and worse, he didn't understand why she was crying. He was in a complicated situation. Desperate, he told her that if she was so angry, she could hit him as hard as she wanted in the face or the stomach. He would also give her her money back when they got home. Jisoo clenched her fist and cursed the situation. She prepared to hit him, causing Hanbyo to close his eyes, waiting for the impact. But instead, she grabbed his shirt and pulled him, confused. Hanbyo followed her until they arrived at an unexpected place. A bar. Stunned, he asked her why she had taken him there. Jisoo denied having done it intentionally, although in the end, she ended up accepting it. She sighed and, with resignation, told him to drink something. She wanted both of them to erase what had just happened from their memory. Since the embarrassment was killing her, Hanbyo had no choice but to accept. In his mind, he was honest in admitting that she didn't give him a good first impression and that he didn't actually like her. However, he also didn't like seeing her so distressed. So he gathered his courage and apologized to her. However, Jisoo didn't seem to care, as she reminded him to drink and forget. He didn't understand why she was bringing it up again, although he knew that she was also thinking about it. She had already heard his apology, and that was enough. At this, Hanbyo let out a nervous laugh, but Jisoo also ended up apologizing. After all, both had made mistakes. It's not that the matter was so serious that she would cry about it, but she still did it without realizing it. That's why she avoided doing things she had never tried before. Now she felt like she had been an idiot. Hanbyo could do nothing but admit that he didn't expect that reaction, as he never imagined she would apologize. For Jisoo, everything was unexpected, but she wanted them to stop saying silly things and keep drinking. After that, their day proceeded normally. When the party began, they started complaining about their companies. They laughed about absurd things, like the fact that it had been both of their first kisses. It was a simple and fun moment while they drank, which led Hanbyo to reconsider his impression of her. Maybe she wasn't as unpleasant as he had thought, especially because he felt they could become close. He also noticed that Jisoo had been speaking to him formally for a while. She admitted this was true, even though he had been doing the same despite them being the same age. It was then that Hanbyo remembered this, because he knew what was about to happen. The next morning, they were both terrified, unable to remember what had happened. When Jisoo saw him, she grabbed him by the neck and demanded an explanation, but Hanbyo couldn't remember anything either. Even though Jisoo wanted to get rid of him to erase her embarrassment, Hanbyo asked her why she was in her birthday suit, something she couldn't remember herself. Although he was also embarrassed, he asked Jisoo to calm down and step aside. Despite her discomfort, she had no choice but to listen to him. Jisoo wanted to know if he really didn't remember anything. Hanbyo, being honest, told her that he only remembered going to a bar, but beyond that, his memories were a blank. He needed to think calmly, especially since he didn't understand how they ended up in that situation. Maybe it was because they weren't in their right minds. In addition, both were quite inexperienced in the subject, and if they had really done something like that, they should have been a little more aware. It was then that Jisoo called Hanbyo because she had found something. When he went to see what it was, he was speechless. It was a bag from a rosary, and that made him feel uncomfortable. Still, he had the feeling that maybe it wasn't what they were imagining. Although they both looked a little embarrassed, Hanbyo commented to Jisoo that it was probably just a vitamin, which she also believed. At this, they both laughed, but their laugh sounded nervous. Hanbyo sighed and told her that first and foremost, she should go cover herself before continuing to talk. Jisoo admitted he was right, although she blushed a little when she noticed what he had seen. It was then that she realized that her jacket was wet, leaving Hanbyo pensive about what she had done. Because of this, they had to hang their things up. At that moment, Hanbyo commented that if she wanted to know his opinion, he believed that no matter how much he thought about it, it didn't seem like they had had a mass, but they couldn't confirm it since neither remembered. Jisoo also knew this, so he proposed to just call it a simple mistake and forget about it. However, seeing the girl's expression, he assumed that she wouldn't agree. Because of this, the atmosphere between them became quite tense, leaving Hanbyo speechless. On the other hand, Jisoo took a breath before yelling, and immediately after, she turned to him and told him that they should have a real one, something that left him completely confused. She explained that she had been thinking about it, but she couldn't take it anymore. Her first kiss had been a mistake, and although she felt silly about it, she had accepted it. However, after all that mess, they had gone out to have fun, and now they had had an accidental mass. Besides, neither of them remembered anything. For her, there had to be a limit so she wouldn't look like an idiot. So she decided to throw everything to hell and admit that she couldn't accept that this had been her first ceremony. Hanbyo, still in disbelief, asked her if she was suggesting they have another one. Jisoo came closer and asked him if it seemed unfair, since she remembered that he himself had said he had never had one before. Hanbyo agreed with her, although he doubted whether it wouldn't be better to just treat it as a mistake and forget it. For Jisoo, on the other hand, it would make no difference to accept it and move on. Even if they forgot about it, it had already happened. Hanbyo didn't understand why she had to be so strict with something like this, so he stood there thinking for a moment. Then he asked her if she wouldn't regret it later, but Jisoo no longer cared. She believed they would be much better off if they were already experienced in a ceremony. Hanbyo, setting aside his doubts, threw everything to hell and accepted. Then he asked Jisoo how he should organize it, but she told him it didn't matter, just that he should start. For her, everything would be fine because he could do whatever he wanted. Hanbyo, still with some uncertainty, knew that he couldn't back down after having accepted. So he took one of the breads the girl had brought. To his surprise, it was softer than he imagined. Seeing her blush, he felt that Jisoo didn't know exactly how to react, as it was a little embarrassing to see him so focused. However, due to his nerves, Hanbyo squeezed the bread a little harder, taking Jisoo by surprise. Still, she didn't want him to ask about everything because she found it a bit pathetic, so he decided to continue without interrupting. In his mind, he never imagined being in a situation like this with her, but now that he was, he thought she was quite cute. Her shy gestures were very different from her usual attitude. It was then that the boy had an idea, and when he was about to eat one of the gummy buttons on the bread, Jisoo, completely flushed, asked him to wait. She pushed him away a little and asked him what he was doing. A bit confused, Hanbyo replied that he was just going to eat one of the gummy buttons, which she found to be the most shameless thing. Intrigued, he asked if it was something she didn't like, but Jisoo felt that she needed to ask first. Hanbyo, a little amused, reminded her that she herself had told him not to ask about everything. Jisoo, embarrassed, accepted that it was fine for him to do what he wanted. She didn't care if he ate the bread, a danonino, or whatever, as long as everything was focused on the chalice. Despite having said that, Jisoo noticed that Hanbyo kept eating the breads, which made her think that he really liked them. He, a little sheepishly, apologized, saying he had done it without thinking, and that he supposed it made her uncomfortable. However, she denied it, as she found it amusing to see him so focused. Then he commented that what he liked most was the cute expression she made while eating, which made Jisoo blush immediately. Not knowing how to react, she gently kicked him and told him to stop saying silly things and continue with the preparations. Hanbyo, amused, apologized and resumed the organization, but he couldn't help but notice how Jisoo was still blushing. He also felt a little embarrassed seeing her lying there, calm, patiently waiting. At that moment, he thought that although he had already seen her in her birthday suit on the first day, maybe it was the current situation that made him want to pray by her side. Jisoo noticed he was pensive, so she asked him what he was looking at and if he wasn't going to start reading the Bible. Hanbyo, a little confused, replied that he thought they should first clean the chalice or make some other preparation. To his surprise, she told him it wasn't necessary and that he should just start reading. However, due to his inexperience, Hanbyo didn't know where to start reading the verses. When he finally began, he noticed that the corruption in Jisoo's heart was too intense, which made him think that maybe they had to do something before starting the mass. At that moment, Jisoo asked him if he had already read the entire first paragraph. He, a little worried, mentioned that he was only halfway through, which she found ridiculous, as she felt her heart would hurt more if he didn't read it all at once. At this, Hanbyo listened to her and finished reading the fragment. However, in doing so, he noticed that the, quote, corruption in Jisoo became even more suffocating. Seeing her breathing with difficulty, he asked if she was okay, to which she nodded, but asked him to take a break before continuing. After a while, Jisoo couldn't help but find the situation they were in funny. Hanbyo reminded her it was her idea, unless she had already had her reality check. She shook her head, explaining that it simply wasn't as good as he had been told. This worried Hanbyo a little, as she had insisted on starting the reading without preparing anything else. However, Jisoo wasn't referring to that, but to the fact that she had always imagined that her first mass would be with her boyfriend in a romantic setting. To her surprise, the reality was different. It wasn't how they had told her it would be, and her heart also hurt. She didn't know what they were doing. Upon hearing this, Hanbyo became pensive. He recognized that feeling, and when he told her, Jisoo looked at him with curiosity, asking if he was serious. Without saying anything else, Hanbyo approached and gave her a tender kiss. When they separated, Jisoo, completely flushed, complained, asking him what he was doing. Hanbyo replied that he thought it would change the atmosphere a little. Then he remembered what she had mentioned about her boyfriend. Although Jisoo wanted to pretend that she didn't care, he was still a man, and above all, the day before he had pretended to be her partner. He then understood that she didn't want her first mass to be something to forget, but Jisoo didn't fully understand his words or what he planned to do to change that. At that moment, Hanbyo began his prayers and, with a smile, told her that he was going to be her boyfriend. At first, she didn't grasp his words, but she suddenly realized what he had said and, surprised, asked him if he was crazy, since she didn't understand who would go out with whom. However, he just reminded her that it would be for that day only. He would only be her boyfriend to coincide with her preferences, as it would be cuter that way. Although she didn't have enough confidence to do something like that, he didn't care because he thought it was better. Embarrassed, the girl wanted to know how the mass would begin, so Hanbyo, without warning, said to her, "I love you, my darling." This left her intrigued, wondering how he could say something so suddenly, but he just asked her if it wasn't true, since he found her quite cute. This comment made her blush, and she wished he would be more sincere with those things. Hanbyo asked if she didn't like it either, but for her, what he had said first was better, so she wanted him to continue. At her requests, Hanbyo approached and gave her a kiss on the cheek. Embarrassed, she asked him why he kept doing that, but for him, her previous reaction had been adorable. Although she found it inappropriate, she wanted to know what else he thought of her, besides being cute. Hanbyo took a moment to think, and, after observing her closely, told her that she was really pretty. Although she didn't believe it, he insisted that she was, especially at that moment. Also, from her exercising, her physique was very attractive. However, she felt insecure, thinking that men preferred sweeter women rather than someone strong. For Hanbyo, however, she was not only strong, but also adorable and charming. He wasn't sure if firm was the right word, which left Jisoo incredulous. She asked him if that was what he considered flirting, to which he, a little embarrassed, apologized for not having found the right expression. But for her, everything was fine. Hanbyo became pensive, as he remembered that she had liked his previous words, but she decided not to give it importance, and asked him to begin the prayers. Still, he approached her ear and whispered that what he had said was not a lie, as her previous reaction had been too cute. He noticed how she became even more embarrassed, which he found adorable, especially since she was pretending not to like the compliments. Although Jisoo wanted him to stop, Hanbyo noticed that her voice trembled with shyness. Even so, he liked everything about her. Even at that moment, about to pray for the good of both of them, he couldn't help but see her as the woman she really was. For him, it was easy to imagine how wonderful it would be if they were a real couple. That last statement made Jisoo cover her face and ask him to stop, since her nerves wouldn't let her be calm in the embarrassing situation. But Hanbyo only saw how incredibly cute she was, so without being able to contain himself, he decided to let his instincts take over. He began the prayers without questioning anything, completely forgetting that certain things could put them in awkward situations, especially living in the same house. However, only one idea was on his mind. He wanted to see more of those adorable expressions that she rarely showed. Still, he didn't give it too much importance, as at that moment, he could only admire how beautiful she looked. Suddenly, Jisoo hugged him and confessed that she felt strange. Hanbyo, curious, asked her if she needed, quote, holy water, to which she replied that she wasn't sure. She felt that something in her heart was about to come out. Without hesitation, he went for the holy water and used it to purify Jisoo's sins. Then she asked him if he had used it on her soul, and he felt it before apologizing. However, she said it was fine. When Hanbyo turned to look at her, he noticed she was smiling. In that instant, Jisoo looked at him fixedly and with a shy but determined tone, asked him if he could be her boyfriend again next time. This confused Hanbyo, who asked her if she really had a reason to need a boyfriend. Jisoo didn't know what to answer. She just looked away, which left him pensive. Then he asked her if she had liked his performance as a boyfriend before. She wasn't referring to that, but he insisted that she seemed to deny it only because she was quite shy. Jisoo cursed herself for having brought up the topic, while Hanbyo kept insisting that if she had mentioned it, it was because she had really liked it. Intrigued, he wanted to know why she was angry with him if it was something she herself had said. Seeing that he wouldn't stop talking, Jisoo decided to go take a bath, leaving Hanbyo laughing and lying down. Meanwhile, she felt she was going crazy, but then she noticed some balloons in the sink and wondered what they were doing there. This is where the story flashes back a bit in time. After their party, Hanbyo and Jisoo couldn't remember exactly why they ended up in a magical town, but they assumed it was because they missed the last train or bus. At some point, they found some packages of balloons, and playing with them, Hanbyo began to inflate some, while others he filled with water. Jisoo found it funny, but in a moment of carelessness, she ended up spilling the water from a balloon, soaking them both. With their clothes wet, they had no choice but to take them off before sleeping. Only then did they remember what had happened that night. Back in the present, Jisoo understood why her soul was rejecting the mass. She realized they had never done it after the party. Hanbyo agreed, but seeing so many packages of balloons, they both wondered what they had used them for and where they were. At that moment, the reality of their first ceremony hit them. For Jisoo, it was the most absurd story she had ever heard in her life, while Hanbyo saw it as a foolish product of their naivete. She admitted it would be funny if it wasn't her own story. Hanbyo looked a little dejected, but Jisoo got out of bed and, changing the subject, said that since they were done with everything in that place, she wanted to go eat, because she was hungry. He accepted, although he was surprised by her reaction. He had thought she would make a fuss and not admit what had happened. Jisoo, noticing his surprise, asked him why he thought she wouldn't accept it, when in the end she herself had proposed the mass. Hanbyo had no choice but to agree with her. Still, she added that for both of their first masses, it wasn't so bad. That left Hanbyo blushing, but it also brought a smile to his face. He was impressed that she admitted it. However, Jisoo didn't want him to change the subject and asked him if he was being shy to avoid answering. Hanbyo preferred to ask her what she wanted to eat, since he would pay. Jisoo unhesitatingly asked for a soup, but before she could say anything else, Hanbyo commented on how beautiful she looked when she was shy. Jisoo, with a smile, just asked him to shut up. Later, the boy called Jisoo to come to his room. When she arrived, he had a gift for her, which took her by surprise. Confused, she asked him why he was giving her money, since for Hanbyo, it was something natural, as they had agreed that he would cover all the expenses. Then Jisoo remembered when he would return her money when they got back home, which left her thoughtful. Finally, she decided it was better for him to keep the money. Hanbyo wanted to know if she didn't want the money he had given her, to which Jisoo replied that she didn't understand why she would take it, especially since she still had her pride. Hanbyo, seeing the envelope, told her that he would feel bad if he accepted it, so Jisoo proposed something different. Next time, instead of money, he would do what she said. She didn't want to admit it, but it was okay if they just pretended to date, since it was the first time someone had fit her preferences like he did. Also, she would like to have a boyfriend and practice until she found one, so that was the favor she wanted to ask him. She needed to try a few more things, but as she had said before, she didn't have a partner. However, before continuing, she asked Hanbyo to stop making that ridiculous face. Hanbyo had no other option. He would have to help her and take on that responsibility. This annoyed Jisoo, who asked him to shut up immediately. He tried to calm her down, but, curious, asked her what was the first thing he should do as her boyfriend. Jisoo, completely embarrassed, made her first request. She wanted a date with him, and to go buy some clothes along the way. This made Hanbyo smile, so the boy wanted to know what day she would be free. Jisoo wasn't sure if it would be in 2 or 3 days, so she proposed to go out that week, which seemed feasible to him. However, she wanted to know how they would handle the expenses, which left Hanbyo pensive for a moment. Finally, he commented that since he had earned a lot of money recently, he didn't mind covering them himself. This made Jisoo blush instantly and refuse, as she didn't feel comfortable with the idea. Hanbyo told her to do what she wanted, but she mentioned that she couldn't give him as much money as last time and that he shouldn't regret it afterward. For him, that wasn't a problem, but he asked her to send him a message when she decided on the day. Jisoo understood, but Min managed to overhear the last part and wondered what they had been talking about. The day of the outing, Hanbyo was honest with himself. He was excited. Although he found it strange to see it as a part-time job, in the end, it was still a date. Since then, he hadn't met anyone like her, and he couldn't afford to either. He felt that everything was the same, but still, it was uncomfortable. Despite that, he could relax thanks to the money Jisoo had given him. As well as enjoying the date a little while, he laughed to himself. He heard a voice asking him what he was doing if he was late. It was Jisoo who asked him to be on time. This confused him, since they had agreed to meet at 7:30 and he had arrived on time. Realizing her mistake, Jisoo, a little embarrassed, apologized. Noticing her reaction, Hanbyo asked her if she was excited since she had arrived early and had been waiting for him. Jisoo was quick to clarify that he shouldn't misunderstand, that she had simply left work early. Still, she wanted them to stop joking and not waste any more time, since she found it embarrassing. Then, Hanbyo took her hand so they could leave together. She, nervous, began to hit him without understanding why he had grabbed her so suddenly. Although her hits hurt, he was worried since she had said she wanted to go on a date, and for him, holding hands was something completely normal in that context. Jisoo, a little nervous, laughed and apologized, admitting that she was a little shy. Hanbyo didn't know what else to say, as they had already done things that were closer than just holding hands, so he didn't understand what the problem was. But for Jisoo, it was different. Still, she didn't want to give it too much importance, and preferred to continue with the outing. When they arrived at the mall, Hanbyo waited for her outside the fitting room, while Jisoo changed. After a few minutes, she announced that she was ready and came out wearing a skirt. She wanted to see what he thought about it. Hanbyo, seeing her, blushed and commented that she looked very different from usual. Jisoo thought that was a bad thing, but he immediately denied it, clarifying that although she looked different, it suited her well, and she looked beautiful. This embarrassed her, but she decided to continue trying on more clothes. When she came out in a yellow dress, Hanbyo told her it fit her perfectly, and that she even seemed to glow. Then, with another dress, he commented that she looked sophisticated and sexy. Finally, when she came out in jeans, she still looked pretty to him. So they continued for a while, trying different combinations until Hanbyo felt his mind was getting lost with every compliment he gave her. After a while, they finally finished. Jisoo praised Hanbyo for having done well. Never in her life had she bought so many clothes, but seeing everything they had acquired, he felt that she was a fashion fanatic. However, she clarified that she wasn't, as she normally only bought 1 or 2 items a year. That day, she just got carried away because someone was watching her while she tried on clothes and saying nice things to her. That was why she ended up buying so much, and she thanked him for going with her. This made Hanbyo smile, who jokingly commented that if she was really that grateful, then she would have to pay him an extra fee. When they arrived home, Hanbyo said goodbye to Jisoo, but she asked him to wait, as she still had something she wanted to show him. He hesitated, thinking she had already shown him all the clothes she bought. She agreed, but explained that although the time they had agreed on had already passed, if he didn't feel like it, he could refuse. Then she confessed that she had not only bought dresses, but also swimsuits. Hanbyo was incredulous to hear that, but Jisoo continued, saying that if he agreed, she could show them to him. At this, Hanbyo blushed and became pensive for a moment before asking her what kind of suit she had bought. For Jisoo, it was nothing out of the ordinary, so she showed it to him without any problems. Hanbyo, a little sheepishly, watched her as she waited for his opinion, asking him if it didn't look good on her. In his mind, he felt that all of this was crazy. But the truth was that the design seemed good, and above all, it fit her well. Jisoo smiled, relieved, and decided to show him the full swimsuit. Hanbyo agreed, although if he thought about it, he had already seen her in her birthday suit before. Still, he didn't know if it was because of the atmosphere or the situation itself, but he felt that his faith was strengthening even more than the last time they prayed together. Jisoo laughed a little, saying that this was more embarrassing than when she was in the open. Hanbyo then got out of bed and called her, wanting to know if they were in the right atmosphere. She just looked at him without saying anything. Still, he insisted on making sure, to which Jisoo smiled and reminded him that she had already told him before that if he asked so many questions, everything would start to get boring. It was then that Hanbyo gave her a tender kiss. Jisoo was surprised, but didn't say anything due to the suddenness of the moment. Instead of pulling away, she hugged him tightly. Hanbyo, amused, asked her if she was expecting them to have a mass, but she just wanted to know if his intentions were so obvious. He smiled and commented that everything she had bought made her look truly beautiful, so much so that he started playing with a gummy button, which made Jisoo embarrassed and asked him to shut up immediately. Hanbyo laughed with an air of superiority and confessed that he liked it when she gave him her praises, as that strengthened his faith. However, he warned her that the neighbors might hear them. Jisoo couldn't believe what she was hearing, so she took a tissue to keep them from hearing her praying. This embarrassed Hanbyo, but he decided that he would do his best to prepare the entire mass well. Before that, he would try to use a jutsu, believing that with it he could relax Jisoo's soul. However, Hanbyo noticed that Jisoo's corruption was starting to overflow, which indicated that the warmth of her heart was sprouting. Before continuing, he told her that he had to go get a danonino, but when he took it, he noticed that his little snack was a little frozen, so much so that it was starting to melt. Still, he decided to go ahead and ate it while commenting that Jisoo was quite shy that day. Without further ado, he continued to enjoy his snack. Jisoo wanted him to stop playing and start the ceremony, which for Hanbyo meant she was finding peace. However, at that moment, he ate a little sphere that came in the danonino, causing Jisoo, distracted, to spill the holy water she had. Hanbyo, amused, commented that he wondered if she would like it, but seeing her reaction, he could now confirm it. Still, he didn't miss the opportunity to ask her if she had really enjoyed it. Jisoo, too embarrassed to answer, simply came closer to him. Hanbyo kept teasing her until the girl pushed him to the floor, looking at him furiously. Annoyed, she told him she was going to get rid of him. He didn't understand why, but Jisoo began to shake him hard, yelling at him that if he got prideful again, she would mercilessly eliminate him. Hanbyo, confused, tried to remember when he had said something like that, but she didn't let him go, almost, saying goodbye to him and sending him straight to God. After a while, Hanbyo was like a statue. He asked her how long he had to stay still while she observed the chalice. The redhead reminded him that if he made a sound or moved, this time she would really get rid of him, so he'd better stay calm. Her plan now was to clean the chalice to get the holy water and make him see how embarrassing everything was. Hanbyo just wanted her to do it quickly. But for Jisoo, it wasn't that simple. She looked nervous and, with shyness, admitted that she found it embarrassing to see a chalice in person. This confused Hanbyo, as he remembered that it wasn't the first time, so he didn't understand why she was being so shy. Jisoo asked him not to compare this with what happened the other day, since before she hadn't even seen the chalice so closely. Now that she had it in front of her, she realized that it was different from what she had imagined. Still, she felt her faith increasing. She turned to look at Hanbyo and, frustrated, yelled at him that thinking about it made her angry. She even blamed him for being evil, accusing him of not respecting the mass organization, especially after eating the danonino and the breads. Without another word, Hanbyo defended himself by telling her that because she had been shouting, the quote, chalice's sparkle had been lost. Jisoo, a little embarrassed, confessed that it was due to her sensitivity. Hanbyo understood and told her that if she didn't want to clean it, she didn't have to. However, Jisoo insisted that she would and that he shouldn't interfere. When she tried to take the chalice for the first time, she backed away, not knowing how to hold it. She noticed that it was much heavier than she had thought. Despite the embarrassment, she took it with determination and asked if that was the correct way. Little by little, the chalice began to regain its sparkle. For Hanbyo, the situation was uncomfortable, but there was something about the way Jisoo was doing it that felt strange. He commented that she didn't have to be so careful, to which she simply affirmed. The redhead continued to observe the chalice in silence before beginning to clean it. This confused Hanbyo, but when he asked her if something was wrong, she denied it, saying that it had just taken him by surprise. Although she admitted that she didn't completely like the situation, she was determined to get the holy water so that he would understand the embarrassment he had caused her. Hanbyo expected Jisoo to be a little clumsy, and indeed, she wasn't cleaning very quickly. In fact, at first, she was trying to use her teeth, which made it clear that her cleaning technique was quite weak. Seeing her like that, he thought she wouldn't manage to get the holy water. However, although her technique was clumsy and ineffective, seeing her so focused increased Hanbyo's faith. In the end, he felt that the holy water was about to come out of the chalice, but since they had nowhere to put it, Jisoo decided to drink from it to purify her sins. It worked, although she barely managed to swallow without choking. With a broken voice, she commented that she almost choked on the water. Still, Hanbyo looked at her with a happy expression. Jisoo noticed his gaze, and with curiosity, asked him if she had done well. He affirmed that she had, congratulating her with a smile. Hearing that, Jisoo blushed and honestly admitted that she was very embarrassed by everything, but in the end, she understood that it hadn't been as bad as she thought. Hanbyo, noticing that she was a little soaked, wanted to go get a towel for her to dry off. While he went for it, Jisoo remained pensive about what to do. When he returned with what he had found, he was surprised to see her drinking the little that was left of the holy water. He asked her, perplexed, why she was doing that. Jisoo, a little embarrassed, replied that she had heard that drinking it all could do her good. In addition, she was curious to try it and had heard that doing so drives idiots like him crazy. Hanbyo smiled when he heard her. He couldn't help but comment that, seeing her like that, she looked adorable, like a girl doing mischievous things. Not knowing exactly why, he confessed that it made him happy. Jisoo, noticing his gaze and hearing his words, blushed even more and avoided looking at him directly. Stammering, she told him that she was going to take a bath, since after their date and working in the morning, she felt like she might smell bad. Before leaving, she suggested that he rest a little. Hanbyo, amused, knew that she was just looking for an excuse to run away due to embarrassment. He approached and hugged her affectionately, telling her that she didn't need to rest and that with those expressions, she was an open book. Jisoo didn't fully understand what he meant, but Hanbyo suspected she was running away because she felt too embarrassed. To stop her, he commented that if she left now, she might ruin the mass preparations since she had been so proactive in organizing everything. He now felt ready to start the ceremony. He asked her if they could continue, to which Jisoo, still nervous, ended up accepting. Hanbyo carried her carefully and laid her down gently, to which she asked him to be gentle. At that moment, he whispered, "Could we pray first for a stray dog?" Jisoo didn't understand what he was referring to, but before she could ask, Hanbyo began to say a prayer for the animal's well-being. The redhead was startled and complained to him for having started out of nowhere, as he had scared her a little. Hanbyo apologized, although he thought they were in sync. Seeing her act with such tenderness, he felt it was the perfect moment to start the consecration. Jisoo, embarrassed, called him an idiot, telling him that when he talked like that, he made her feel even more embarrassed. Hanbyo didn't understand why she felt that way, but she, completely flushed, just asked him to start reading the Bible. He didn't understand why she was suddenly angry again, but Jisoo denied it, saying that he should just keep doing whatever he wanted. Upon hearing him in that way, Hanbyo felt animated and continued with his prayers. Suddenly, Jisoo asked him if it was just her imagination or if the chalice's sparkle had intensified. Hanbyo commented that she might just be imagining it, but she felt as if the corruption in her heart was being cleaned from deep within. It didn't hurt, but she recognized that it was an unimaginable warmth. Hanbyo was surprised by her words, and with an embarrassed smile, told her that now she was worse than him, because by saying those kinds of things, she made him blush. Jisoo didn't understand why he was telling her that, but they continued with their prayers anyway. It was then that, without meaning to, Jisoo spilled the holy water she had in her hands. Hanbyo noticed it immediately and with a little concern asked her if she could still continue with the ceremony. They continued with their praises, but Hanbyo, seeing Jisoo's reaction, felt that he was going to make a mistake and would end up spilling the holy water. However, she asked him not to say silly things. Still, he decided to go for more water to be able to complete the ceremony quickly. He brought the holy water and used it to purify the girl's soul, liberating her. When everything was over, Hanbyo felt relieved that everything had gone well. A little later, Jisoo mentioned that she was tired and that she should go back to her room as soon as possible. For Hanbyo, there was no problem with her resting a little before leaving, but she felt that if she did, she would fall asleep in a matter of minutes. Then, he proposed to wake her up if that happened. Jisoo looked at him, surprised by his proposal, but quickly looked away and covered herself with the pillow, feeling embarrassed. Still, with a smile, she commented that he would surely like that very much. That response took Hanbyo by surprise, who, embarrassed, also looked away. Jisoo, noticing his reaction, smiled and asked him when he would be free again. She wanted to schedule their next date. Hanbyo wasn't sure, but he supposed it would be next week. For Jisoo, that was perfect, as she had free time that weekend, and she had also bought a lot of new clothes that she wanted to wear. Hanbyo watched her and thought about how happy she looked. She was like a girl excited for a picnic the next day. However, a strange feeling of worry began to invade him. He didn't know how to explain it or the exact reason behind that unease, so he simply decided to let it go. The next day, Min went directly to Hanbyo and asked him if it was true that he was pretending to be someone's boyfriend in exchange for money. At that moment, Hanbyo understood what had been worrying him. What he didn't understand was how Min had found out. Confused, he asked her where she had heard that, and she replied that Jisoo told her. Now everything made sense. Although Min clarified that Jisoo never said it directly, her answers to her questions gave her that impression. In any case, she understood that lately, both of them had been getting closer. Then Min began to ask Hanbyo some questions. He became pensive until he heard her whisper that 1,000,000 won was too much just for pretending to be a boyfriend. That phrase made Hanbyo analyze the situation more calmly. He realized that the problem was more serious than he imagined. First, he had received money from Jisoo, then she paid him for their second date, and as if that weren't enough, they also had a mass together. From the outside, all of that seemed like a very strange relationship. And considering how strict the manager Min was, if she found out, she could even expel him. A little nervous. Hanbyo assured Min that it wasn't as if he was swindling someone or anything like that. Min knew it, and that surprised Hanbyo. She explained that Jisoo had decided the amount of money and that she even heard that he tried to give it back to her. Hanbyo felt relieved that everything ended without major inconvenience. However, Min suddenly murmured something in a low voice. Hanbyo didn't hear it well, but it seemed to say that it wasn't as if nothing had happened. That confused him. Min, for her part, saw it differently. For her, Jisoo is not asking for anything in return for the money, but simply saw it as a favor. Hanbyo knew that the situation might sound strange, so he tried to calm her down. He assured her that there was nothing to worry about, since it wouldn't happen again. Besides, he also didn't want Jisoo to make decisions without considering the consequences. But then, Min made an unexpected comment. She said that maybe Hanbyo didn't feel comfortable with the situation, and that was okay. After all, she understood that it could be difficult for him to accept something like that from a woman a little older than him. Hanbyo didn't understand what she was referring to. Then Min made a surprising proposal. She asked him to pretend to be her boyfriend for a day. Hanbyo was completely bewildered. He didn't understand how they had gotten to that conversation or what was happening. Let's go back in time a bit. When Jisoo felt relieved that they hadn't expelled Hanbyo from the house, he, for his part, hoped that she would be calm, since Min hadn't said much about it from the beginning. She was a bit reserved with her questions, but he thought everything went quite well, and Jisoo understood that. Still, the boy mentioned that the manager was a kind person, though quite strict, which he found understandable. What he was getting at was that no one would look kindly on someone who receives money for pretending to be a boyfriend. Jisoo was honest. She should have told Min that it wasn't such a big deal, but her mind started to go blank and she got sidetracked, apologizing for it. Hanbyo became pensive, but assured her that it really wasn't that big a deal and that no one was hurt. Everything had been resolved and he hoped she wouldn't worry, as he would soon be back home. Jisoo just told him to take care of himself, but after hanging up, she wondered if he really would be okay. Then we see Hanbyo thinking that his image of the manager until that moment was of someone cold and strict. He couldn't figure out what she was thinking at all. That was exactly what Jisoo had told him, since she would be the last person to do something like that, and suddenly, it was that very person who asked him to pretend to be her boyfriend. Very similar to what happened with Jisoo at the time, which he found quite strange. That's why he asked Min for an explanation about her proposal. She was silent for a moment, trying to understand what Hanbyo meant. He wanted to know why she had called him to that place, and she looked away. Min commented that she had already told him in the morning she wanted him to pretend to be her boyfriend just for that night. That's why Hanbyo asked her to speak honestly, as he might be able to help her. At his question, Min wanted to know if he expected a particular reason because she just needed him to act as her partner for one day, nothing more. That left the boy speechless. Although he understood the situation, he was surprised that she mentioned that she would even pay him 1,000,000 won. Min agreed, and although she thought it was a lot, it didn't seem like such an excessive expense. So much so that Hanbyo couldn't help but wonder if there really were people like her for whom money was insignificant. Min noticed that he was still hesitating, so she asked him if he thought it was something similar to what happened between him and Jisoo. In that case, he was misunderstanding things. To begin with, she asked him if they could start their date, and he agreed. So Hanbyo wanted to know if there was any place she wanted to go or if she would like to do something special. Min mentioned that she was a little hungry, but they came across a closed establishment. The same thing happened with another place. Hanbyo felt that the date was going quite badly, although for Min, that didn't seem to matter, as she also liked toast. Despite going to see a movie, he found it quite boring. To their bad luck, there was no time left to do anything else, as everything was closed. Min asked him if they would go back home, and although he agreed, in his mind he apologized for how everything had turned out. By the time they returned to the house, Hanbyo knew in his heart that the date had ended, without anything going as they had planned. Although Min didn't look, she wondered if, since things didn't turn out as expected, she wanted to know if they could extend the date agreement, to which he agreed. However, when Min wanted to know how much she should pay him, he replied that it wasn't necessary, which intrigued the girl. Hanbyo was honest. They had barely done anything they had planned that day, and he questioned how he could charge her more money for that. He even thought about giving back the payment she had already given him, and he also proposed that they leave the formalities aside. So much so that he wanted to know if there was something she really wanted to do, or if she preferred to just stay home. For Min, there was no need to continue with all of that. But after thinking about it for a bit, she murmured that it was different from what she had imagined. Hanbyo didn't manage to hear her well and asked her to repeat it, but instead, she asked him if they could talk alone first. When they entered Min's room, Hanbyo couldn't help but look around. He noticed that, more than a bedroom, the space looked like an office. Then she asked him if they could extend their deal until early morning, and he accepted, saying that they could do whatever she wanted. Although he was a little nervous, he asked her what she was trying to do. Min looked at him and commented that he also had to start preparing things for the mass. Hanbyo didn't understand what she was referring to, but for her, it was something completely normal since he was now her boyfriend. But for Hanbyo, that seemed totally inappropriate. Instead, Min said that now she understood everything and asked him if she should pay an extra for that. He was surprised, while Min was willing to cover what was necessary for the ceremony. This left Hanbyo even more surprised, who mentioned that that wasn't the problem. Min Sae then wanted to know what the problem was for him. It was a bit strange that she offered him money so openly in exchange for a consecration. She was silent for a moment and then commented that yes, it was weird. Although Hanbyo wanted to know what she meant exactly, she explained that despite his words, he had already had a consecration with Jisoo. That left Hanbyo speechless. Although he wanted to understand what she meant by that, Min clarified that the only thing he had done was pretend to be her boyfriend at her workplace. Although both had said the same thing, she heard something else. She didn't intend to spy, but she heard that Jisoo asked him to go on a date, and a little later, she found out that they were together in a room. That left the boy even more bewildered. He wondered if Min had really heard them praying, and that put him in a completely different situation. That's why he explained to Min that what happened with Jisoo was an accident during a paid date. But she wanted to know what the difference was between that and offering money for a mass. From her point of view, it seemed as if the ceremony was a service included at the end of the date. Hanbyo tried to clarify that it was not a service or anything like that. However, Min commented that even if he said so, no one would believe it. After all, she offered him a large sum of money for the date, and it seemed logical to think that the consecration was also included. She supposed that he didn't want to seem like a coward, but she believed he had the right to ask for more if that was also part of the agreement. That was exactly what Hanbyo already knew. What was tormenting him? From the depths of his mind, He had remembered it. That's why he made a decision at that moment and confessed to Min that although it was hard to admit, she was not wrong. Still, he was going to make an excuse, interesting the girl because what Jisoo had said at the beginning was not a lie. After she asked him on a date, nothing else happened. He admitted that Jisoo offered him money, and he understood that that could seem suspicious, as well as that he needed the money, but it wasn't just for that. What he really felt was that he was happy. He had never been on a date before. He wasn't trying to make the redhead fall in love with him or planning to officially date her. He just liked the vibe and the energy of that moment. That's why what happened. During the date, he enjoyed everything and went to sleep in a good mood. And curiously, he didn't know what else to say. He supposed that was the difference. When they offer him money for a mass, it's not the same. He wasn't criticizing or anything, he just felt that way. This left Min quite impressed, who murmured that she didn't believe he was lying, but she had one last question. According to his words, money wasn't the important thing. That confused Hanbyo, as he didn't quite understand what she was referring to. For Min, he seemed reluctant to accept something in exchange for money. So she believed that he only needed the vibe and energy. No matter what, he just wanted to feel comfortable with what he was feeling. Although for Hanbyo, it was a very sudden change, Min was just fulfilling what he had asked her. She wasn't trying to show off, but she admitted that maintaining her youth at her age was difficult. Still, she knew how to lead a consecration and hoped that from his point of view, he would understand that she had nothing to lose. Hanbyo was speechless. He asked her to calm down before doing anything. He wasn't saying he didn't like the idea, but he found it a bit embarrassing that it was she who was starting to lead the ceremony. However, seeing the sparkle of the chalice, Min seemed convinced that they were on the right track. That left the boy speechless again. For Min, the Visiger sound object reflected honesty, and from that moment on, she intended to help Hanbyo be just as sincere. That's why she whispered that he could feel free to tell her that he liked her when it was time to pray. At this, Hanbyo was quite flushed. He recognized that this time, Min was much more daring than usual. But she replied that she thought they had reached a reasonable conclusion after their discussion, asking him if he didn't agree with that. She gave him a small kiss on the cheek, but since he was a bit confused, he pulled away. Then Min noticed that the boy's face was quite red, and although he felt embarrassed, he wanted to know if it was true that she would do whatever he wanted, so he kissed her. At that moment, Min could only look at him in silence. A little later, Hanbyo was ready to start a mass, so Min noticed that he was becoming more daring, although his kisses were a bit disappointing. Over time, Hanbyo prepared to start his jutsu, although Min commented that he should do whatever he wanted. This left the boy pensive, as from the way she talked, he could assume that she was someone with experience. He wondered if he would be able to calm her corruption, or if she would criticize him like she did with the kiss. So Hanbyo used a jutsu while eating one of the breads without taking his eyes off Min, but he noticed that she didn't react in any way. Then, putting everything else aside, she wanted to know if that had been all, but he wasn't willing to give up. He wanted to eat a danonino first. In the boy's mind, the doubt arose as to why she seemed so worried if she was the one who proposed the ceremony first, or if she was starting to feel strange. Then, when he thought the girl was beginning to overflow with corruption, he prepared to read the Bible, although Min told him to do it and that he shouldn't worry about her. Her words annoyed Hanbyo a little, but he wasn't going to back down. Since she had given him her consent, he would do whatever he wanted. It was then that when he said the first prayer, he noticed something strange. Suddenly he couldn't move, as if the corruption within her wouldn't leave him alone. On the other hand, she noticed that he had remained still and asked Hanbyo if he was going to do nothing, to which he replied that he was going to read the scriptures and that he wouldn't stop until she received a divine revelation. This seemed quite curious to Min, although she again commented that he should try hard, but not overdo it. This comment made the boy think that he was starting to get irritated every time she said something, especially because of her indifferent attitude. However, he wondered why he then felt so calm by her side. While he took a breath, she asked him if he was going to look for the holy water, to which he denied, as there was still a long way to go in the ceremony. Although Min knew that he could no longer continue with the mass, and that she could use the holy water on her soul, Hanbyo simply let himself be carried away by her words and listened to her to purify himself. However, he looked quite exhausted, so Min proposed that they take a break. A little later, she commented that he was more clumsy at consecrations than she thought. This worried Hanbyo, although Min admitted that at first she had her doubts, but now that she could confirm it, she was thinking of kicking him out of the shared house, although she believed it was no longer necessary to understand him better. She tells us that at first, she didn't plan on doing something like this, as it was quite uncomfortable. She started to have a premonition and needed to investigate, so she went to Jisoo to ask her if she was in a relationship with Ambul since they had become close. The redhead didn't see it that way. She admitted it was more of a transaction than a relationship, although she later realized her words sounded bad and wanted to explain everything that had happened, but the more Min investigated, the more her suspicions grew. However, when Jisoo told her everything, she admitted that it was she who had forced Ambul to help her and pretend to be her boyfriend, as nothing happened after that, hoping Min would understand, which Min understood and hoped he would leave for work soon, otherwise he would be late. However, she knew internally that investigating from the outside wouldn't accomplish anything and would even make her look very suspicious, especially because before leaving, Jisoo asked her not to kick the guy out of the house. It was something she begged, assuring her she would take full responsibility. Min couldn't believe she was defending him. That's when she thought the worst, that possibly Jisoo was being manipulated by a terrible man who was taking all her money, so much so that he could leave her ruined, or was even using her to practice masses in secret. But she couldn't kick someone out based only on assumptions. She had to confirm it for herself. That's why she asked Ambul to be her boyfriend for a day so she would have enough proof. However, the date was not good enough to make a woman crazy. He even rejected the extra money she offered him. Even so, she tried to perform a consecration just to confirm her suspicions, but it was a bit clumsy. So we returned to the present, where she was criticizing him, saying his way of speaking was like that of a typical bad man, and that he didn't have enough talent in ceremonies to captivate a girl. She no longer had any reason to keep doubting him. When Min fell silent, this irritated the guy, who wanted to know why she was only telling him now. When Min asked him if he was angry, he simply remained silent. She understood, as from his point of view, he couldn't help but feel angry. But for her, it was necessary. That's why she wanted to apologize again, admitting it was her fault. Still, the guy just sighed. It wasn't that he didn't understand her. From Min's perspective, anyone could have misunderstood. It was already a lot that she had almost kicked him out of the house, so he was relieved that the situation was resolved. However, it felt very strange that everything was fixed just because he was bad at masses. Now that he wasn't going to be kicked out, he didn't know if he should feel confused, happy, or frustrated. That was everything. This made Min reflect, who could understand that she had hurt his male pride, although she didn't know if what she was about to say would comfort him. She clarified that being clumsy with masses didn't mean he did it wrong. He didn't understand what she meant, but Min supposed that the atmosphere was very important for them as girls. She was determined to prove her suspicions, not consecrations. It's very difficult for someone to have a divine revelation when they don't enter with that intention from the beginning. For her, something like that only happens if you are with the right person at the right time, so she hoped he wouldn't feel so disappointed about her calling him clumsy. Although her words angered Ambul again, he just lay back for a moment and thought he should thank her sarcastically. He said it was very comforting. Min, at that moment, could only sigh. She also admitted her words were true. But talking about it wasn't exactly the most comforting thing. This intrigued the guy by her comment, but Min continued by saying that in these cases, actions speak louder than 1,000 words. That left Ambul surprised, because he still didn't understand what she was trying to say. She wanted him to feel comfortable, and that she would take care of guiding the mass, so she gave him a small kiss. But although he pulled away confused, she kissed him again. This made Ambul wonder in his mind how a simple kiss could increase his faith. It was very different from the previous time, although his annoyance clearly remained. Min also noticed that he seemed to be upset, but fortunately she could see the glow of the chalice that couldn't lie, although Ambul blamed the kiss for everything he was feeling. She assumed that he actually liked it. The guy replied that it confused him, but Min didn't want him to take it as an apology, since they would have their consecration until he felt better, as she would take care of comforting him with all her soul. Ambul was surprised, while Min waited for him to say something. Still, the guy finally understood what she meant, so he decided to let her do whatever she wanted. Although Min remained thoughtful, she smiled at his response, but commented that she wasn't making fun of him or anything. She noticed that he was normally kind and polite, but seeing him grumble that way was quite different. Then Ambul said that if that was all, it would be better to start their consecration. Min gave him a small kiss, as she found his embarrassed face funny and told him to just relax, and she would take care of everything. This made Ambul blush, and he didn't even notice that he was still annoyed about having misunderstood the whole situation, something that ended up confusing the protagonist. Min apologized as she wanted to comfort him by giving the chalice a soft kiss. Of course, Ambul was embarrassed to see her, but when he asked her why she was doing all that, she replied that it was her duty, although he didn't mean that exactly, but was hoping for something more. That made Min hesitate a little, but she asked him not to worry since she would take care of it. She knew the guy worked very hard at the company, even on weekends, and that it could be a very heavy task to come home and have to live with the others, as she recognized that he had had a very difficult day. Although Ambul looked pensive, he felt the need to go for the holy water, although he supposed that was due to Min, who knew how to act in those situations, and also because of the atmosphere of the moment. Although he looked away at that instant, Min noticed that he was very embarrassed, which surprised the guy. She had seen him grumbling before, and now he couldn't even meet her gaze. She asked him if he was shy, to which he denied, saying he just felt a little uncomfortable. Min recognized that kind of feeling and hoped that he wasn't so withdrawn and could meet her gaze. She wanted him to see that the same girl who had angered him was now there to support him, willing to help him with whatever he needed during this consecration and for his well-being. She hoped he would look at her and not miss that moment, which made him blush even more. For Ambul, seeing that sudden change in her was very strange, as if she were a different person, and he was still processing it all at that moment. Min began to clean the deepest stains from the chalice, which led Ambul to joke that she seemed very focused. Still, Min continued cleaning, using a technique she had learned in Russia. Although Ambul was a little nervous, for her, it was something she had seen before. She noticed that little by little, the guy was starting to be more sincere, and that motivated her to keep going, although with that technique, she was going a little fast. Ambul warned her that if she continued like that, she could get the holy water. Min understood what he meant, but for her, it made no sense to go slow. If she could still make the chalice shine, even if she had already gotten the holy water. That's why she asked him not to worry and just to calm down. It was then that revitalizing water sprouted from the object, splashing a little on Min, although she was a little surprised since it was the second time it had happened, and there was still a lot left. She thought Ambul looked adorable, and noticed that maybe he needed a little more comfort. Although they took a moment to take a break, the guy took the opportunity to apologize, as he needed to clear his head a little. Min noticed that the holy water was quite powerful since its energy felt intense, and it took her some time to remove it completely. For the protagonist, he at least managed to get rid of all the substance he had been stained with. Still, he wasn't sure if he should clean the chalice with something else, as he doubted it would be completely dry with just paper. That made Min smile and commented that it was okay, everything was safe. She thought he was bothered to see her covered in the water, but it was something that didn't bother her at all when it happened, which made Ambul blush a little. Min noticed that the chalice shone more than before, assuming it was from the moment the stains were removed, since before it had bothered him slightly. Although she probably waited a long time. Thanks to that, she could see that Ambul was a courteous person. Despite still being quite embarrassed, Ambul asked if they would continue with the next part of the ceremony, which made Min smile since he now seemed a bit anxious for the mass. Although he denied that was the case, Min took out the Bible and apologized, clarifying that she didn't mean to say that he couldn't ask for anything. He expressed his desire for them to begin with the prayers. At that moment, Min felt a kind of peace in her soul, being by his side. She reminded him that if he were more familiar with consecrations, he would perhaps have more doubts about him, which made Ambul reflect. He could notice that she was showing herself to be completely different from how she was a few minutes ago. For him, everything had been strange from the beginning, since he had gotten used to how she acted before. Min simply looked away and commented that if he liked her more, she could behave as before, but Ambul didn't mean that. Min laughed, explaining that she was just joking, since they were both in the preparations for the mass, and there was no need for them to be so formal and polite with each other. Being in that situation, they could let go a little as if they had a different personality that they couldn't show outside. She hoped that they could both freely express what they were thinking, since for her, that would make them both feel better. Although Ambul was a little embarrassed, the girl recommended that he let himself be carried away by his instincts when praying, since she found him very cute, being shy and grumpy, but if no guy was proactive, he wouldn't have any popularity, of course. Ambul got annoyed and said that if she had been like that since the first time they prayed, the situation would have been very different. Min fell silent, since for her, that first time was because of Jisoo, and she thought she shouldn't talk about that since it involved another girl in a serious moment. Although Ambul blamed Min, she replied that he was wrong, and that he couldn't do it, so as punishment she would let a little of his corruption be released. She admitted that before she was only trying to comfort him, but that would no longer be the case. Ambul didn't fully understand what was happening, but for Min it was complicated to explain it clearly. Still, she hoped that by releasing that corruption from his heart, he wouldn't turn to the holy water so soon. In his mind, Ambul knew that everything was relatively calm a moment ago, but now that he felt a little cornered, he had no other option, so he accepted Min's challenge, hoping that she would stop releasing that corruption. Although he wanted to focus on reading the Bible, for Min it was useless for him to try to resist, since it made no sense to oppose and he should simply go for the water. Then Ambul used the holy water to purify his soul a little, which was surprising for Min, since it was the third time it had happened. She congratulated the guy, and at that instant, he began to read the Bible. This left Min quite intrigued, but Ambul commented that he still wasn't finished, especially since they still hadn't finished encouraging each other. He still had enough energy to continue his prayers. This made the girl smile, but while she bit him, she said they couldn't continue. This action left the protagonist quite confused, since she, still with a smile, told him that he was very careless and that it hurt to continue praying for peace after having used the holy water. That's why she proposed that they rest a little. However, he didn't care, since seeing her happy was enough. Although she didn't want him to be so stubborn, she hoped he could be a little more considerate. Seeing her so cute, Ambul looked away, but accepted her conditions. A little later, Ambul tells us that he had been thinking about getting a little revenge. He didn't like the feeling of being under control that night, but what he really hoped for was for Min to lose her mind. However, he realized that she was congratulating him, and that was something he had been hearing quite frequently lately. For that reason, the guy was visibly blushing and confessed to her that he was embarrassed that she congratulated him, since she treated him with such tenderness as if he were a child. This made Min smile, who noticed that he had a weakness for compliments, but it wasn't something feigned or forced. They simply felt that their hearts were beginning to complement each other, and that made it genuine. She promised Ambul that he would soon be very competent, especially because, thanks to the chalice, he was helping her purify her deepest sins, which made her feel at peace. She believed she was close to having a divine revelation. This made the guy blush again, who continued reading the Bible. Thanks to his efforts, Min almost achieved it, and Ambul mentioned that she could see how her sins were vanishing. For her, that was something comforting. Although she wanted to take a break, she suggested to the guy not to worry about her and to continue with his prayers, since although she mentioned resting, she didn't want to stop listening to him. Although Ambul apologized for being a little slow, she simply watched him with happiness, as she also enjoyed the Mass, and believed she was about to be freed from more guilt. Although she could sense that he was going for more holy water, the guy just looked at her without saying a word, unable to believe how she managed to guide him on the path of God. For that reason, he decided to go for the holy water to purify his soul and feel better, to which she simply felt. Thanks to that, she could see how he used a lot of holy water, but she wanted him to feel comfortable while she took care of cleaning everything. For Ambul, it had been so gratifying that he felt the night was unusually long. He was a little exhausted after everything was completely finished. Wrapped in a feeling similar to a dream, he simply fell asleep right there. The next morning, the guy woke up a little confused since Min was still sleeping there. To top it off, Jisoo asked him what he was doing there. Although he didn't know what to answer, he commented that it would take him a while to explain it. At that moment, Min woke up a little disconcerted upon seeing that he had woken up earlier. As Jisoo didn't say anything, Min barely noticed her presence. Although the redhead was blushing, she congratulated the guy as she had gone to look for Min to talk about his stay, as she was worried, but she supposed that was no longer necessary. She felt she had interrupted something, so she quickly said goodbye and closed the door, leaving them both in silence as Jisoo ran back to her room. She wondered what had just happened, how it was possible that the two of them were in the same room. But with that doubt, another one arose. She didn't know if the two of them were dating. A little later, Ambul thought that the biggest worry of someone who works with a fixed salary at a company is simply saying they're going to lunch, but that didn't seem to apply in the least to his life. Still, he had no option but to summarize what had happened that morning, so he decided to tell Min everything that happened. She understood that it had been her own mistake. She now knew that Ambul wasn't trying to deceive Jisoo. She just hadn't thought that part through. Still, she assured him that she would take care of everything and that he just needed to go to work. Although in Ambul's mind, he didn't have a very clear idea of what she meant by that, or that it was her fault. However, if he analyzed it, not even he, being her boyfriend, had done anything wrong. So why did he feel so strange? On the other hand, Min was talking to Jisoo but didn't know where to start. First, she wanted to apologize to the girl. It seemed silly to her not to have thought about what the redhead might be thinking at that moment. Although Jisoo felt a little uncomfortable, she told Min that she didn't understand why she was apologizing, since, as Ambul had said, they had an agreement to help each other out and were not in a romantic relationship. That worried Min because she knew that wasn't true. She reminded her that she herself had asked Ambul on a date and that there was clearly something more between her and Ambul. Also, if she looked back, Min had done everything possible to protect him. However, the redhead insisted that it wasn't about any of that. She had never been on a date before, and that's why she asked him for that favor. As for the mask, she felt that people were more open lately and hoped that Min could understand it, as it was something common among people nowadays. Still, she would have felt very bad if Ambul was expelled because of her. She didn't know what relationships were like in Min's time, but she believed that was something normal now. That made Min reflect, who recognized that there was a generational gap between them. Still, Jisoo made it clear that she didn't even have a romantic relationship with Ambul, and that from now on she had no intention of doing another consecration or asking him for more favors. She hoped that Min wouldn't worry about it anymore, and she understood. From that moment on, she decided that she would no longer worry about it, although for Jisoo, in her mind, it was enough to solve everything. She was clear that there was no such relationship between her and Ambul. Now he could officially be Min's boyfriend, and she apologized if she had caused anyone anxiety. Still, Jisoo also apologized for having barged into their room and praised Min, telling her how beautiful she was, although internally, she felt relieved that everything turned out well. She couldn't help but wonder why she still felt weird. As she exercised, it felt frustrating, especially because it seemed like something was still bothering her. Because of that, she stopped jogging, and while she was internally reproaching herself for not being able to concentrate, in a moment of silence, she heard a voice that asked her why she didn't take a break. Upon turning around, she saw it was Ambul. The girl asked him what he was doing there. Ambul, although he seemed a little worried, he told her that he had been looking for her. He had just left work, and, not seeing her at home, he decided to ask Min, who mentioned that she would probably be at the park. That made the redhead blush. She wanted to know why he was looking for her, and he suggested they take a walk while they chatted, or, if she preferred, they could go to a cafe for a drink. That made the girl's cheeks burn, and she asked him if he was crazy, since he couldn't say something like that when he had a girlfriend. She told him there were things one could joke about, but that wasn't one of them, and that he should think more before speaking. That completely confused Ambul. He wanted to understand what she meant, but Jisoo didn't allow him to get closer again, and, without listening to him, she ran away. More than anything, the only thing she wanted was for him to leave, although the guy didn't hesitate to go after her shortly after. Ambul asked her if she was listening to him, but she was totally embarrassed. She just managed to sigh, wishing that he would tell her that everything had been a misunderstanding from the start, but that wasn't possible since she had left without giving him a chance to explain. He just let out a slight laugh, but if they thought about it calmly, it didn't make sense that he and Min were dating. For Jisoo, it was difficult to process the scene she had witnessed, as it was easy to misinterpret everything. Ambul agreed with her, but commented that if being together meant something just because they had slept together, then he and Jisoo would also be dating, which made her blush again. She didn't want to give it too much importance, as he used to be someone with a pure heart and was about to be expelled, but now he spoke with confidence. Jisoo understood that he was playing with his apparent innocence to continue learning about masses. She thought everything was fine, or that maybe he wanted to improve his personal experience with this little game. For Ambul, everything had been something simple, just a feeling of well-being, and he didn't understand why she thought his intention was to improve his technique or strategy. She continued with her joke, implying that he just wanted to gain some experience with a slightly older woman because it was obvious. She asked him if he had nothing to say about it. Ambul was already annoyed and was about to respond when they heard the voice of a child asking his mom what they were talking about. Upon noticing that, both Jisoo and Ambul decided to leave. In his mind, the guy recognized that he felt quite uncomfortable that morning, maybe because they had already cleared up the misunderstanding and started talking about unimportant things. Now, he felt he should be calm, but he couldn't help but feel that everything was a lie. So, Jisoo wanted to ask him something, and Ambul paid attention. She had heard that it wasn't that he couldn't go out, but that he simply chose not to. She wanted to know the reason. He seemed a little confused, since for him it was an unexpected question. Of course, Jisoo didn't know if there was a story behind it. According to Ambul, he has just been busy working and earning money since he graduated. Almost nothing has changed. He's just changed side jobs in addition to his main job as a salaried employee at a company. But he admitted that it's not something he thinks about too much. Still, she understood him. Afterwards, she asked him if they had a date that weekend. As she remembered, they had already talked about it last time. But Ambul wasn't entirely convinced. He refused to have another date, since he had thought about it more calmly, and he felt as if he had done something horrible to Jisoo. He apologized, which confused her. She wanted to know why he was apologizing. For him, everything had been a misunderstanding, but when he talked to Min about it, he began to see things from another perspective. He felt guilty, as if, after having fun with her, he had stolen money from her. He assumed that was the cause of his discomfort, Jisoo was thoughtful for a moment. She wanted to know if he was serious. When he looked up, she asked him if he was really okay with all that. She confessed that she was thinking of leaving him and letting him keep her money, leaving Ambyul speechless since he didn't know if she was serious. This annoyed the girl, as her intention was for him to simply accept the money. Although she felt a bit nervous, she didn't want him to feel bad about it, she just wanted him to see it as a part-time job. She explained that it was like a child saving up to help their dad pay the rent, something that Ambyul found quite strange if it were put in those terms. For the redhead, however, it was not strange at all, it was fine, as long as they communicated. However, despite being flushed, upon thinking it through, everything seemed absurd to her. Since she was the one who had asked him to be her boyfriend in the first place, she was also the one who proposed the date. And although it was hard for her to admit it, even the topic of the consecration had come from her. That's why she wanted to know what he thought about trying something more serious, since Min had misinterpreted everything and believed he was doing it for money, even thinking that he was pressuring her, which made Ambyul nervous. He denied that it was like that since the first time it happened, because they didn't know the situation well. And the second time was because Jisoo provoked it, but he also shared that feeling, which made the girl happy. For her, there was no problem. And although Ambyul remained silent, he admitted that everything had been a misunderstanding and that he had never done anything wrong. Of course, for Jisoo, it seemed like he was now victimizing himself, which made the guy laugh a little. Still, she knew things would be worse for him if he started to deny it, since she didn't know what to do with the clothes she had bought the previous week. This confused Ambyul, as he didn't understand why she was bringing it up all of a sudden. She continued saying that she had acquired a lot of clothes she wouldn't normally wear, because she had no one else to go out with, except him. That surprised Ambyul, but at the same time, it brought a smile to his face. She wanted to know why he was laughing or if he was making fun of her. He knew it was his fault for having refused, since she had bought those clothes for the date. And he didn't tend to let her money go to waste. This impressed the redhead. Although it also left her speechless, she just cursed his smile. But to him, it seemed charming. She had no idea of all the problems he had gone through that day, although Ambyul made a comment that made the girl laugh, although at the same time, it made her a little angry. For him, it was funny. Even so, she thanked him because she learned something by seeing him like that. Ambyul wanted to know what she had learned, but she wouldn't tell him. That's how the guy tells us that the chaos of that day had finally ended. Everything turned out well, and there was nothing to worry about. He even planned a whole day for their dates, convinced that time would fly by when there were no worries. In the blink of an eye, it was already Friday, but upon noticing it, he thought he was wrong, since Jisoo commented that it was strange that Min insisted so much on her problems. Although Min was just worried, she didn't understand why she reacted with anger. For Jisoo, that issue was hers alone, and she wanted her to leave her alone. But from Min's perspective, the situation didn't look good, and she didn't think she was doing a good job. That's why Ambyul wondered why all of that was happening to him again. That's why we traveled to the past when Ambyul was helping Min move some things after her workday. Of course, there was more to it than he imagined, but the girl knew that, as the newest resident, he wasn't aware of the frequent events they organized. She hoped he would see it as a social gathering, where they could enjoy food and drinks. Ambyul became thoughtful. Since he had been reflecting on that for a while, he asked her if she wouldn't end up running out of money if she kept holding such gatherings, which left Min a little confused. He explained that the rent in that place was quite low. They didn't charge additional fees for utilities or administration fees, in addition to the extra expense for food and drinks for the meetings. That's why he wanted to know if at some point it wouldn't end up affecting her financially, and Min, upon hearing his words, she assumed he had a point, especially because if he didn't eat so much ramen, they wouldn't run out so quickly. If they continued like that, they wouldn't be able to cover the costs and would end up in the red, although Ambyul thought he had understood that he could take whatever he wanted from the kitchen. She didn't expect him to do it every day. He thought eating ramen would help reduce expenses, but Min just smiled, since she was joking with him, as she knew he got nervous easily. That left him disconcerted, because he thought she was going to scold him, and that's why he felt embarrassed. However, she was honest, and she was just bothered that he ate ramen all the time, so she decided to have a little fun, which confused the guy even more. Min offered to cook him whatever meals he wanted, as long as he let her know. He, a little embarrassed, simply nodded. Noticing that she was showing him a different side, it wasn't common to see her make jokes, but he felt that every person had different sides. She wanted to know if he was referring to what had happened that day. Of course, for her, it was just another joke. Ambyul was still embarrassed, but he noticed that she was dressed differently than usual. Min commented that that was a strange way to flirt, but she just laughed a little, explaining that it was what she usually wore at home when she wasn't working. It was very comfortable since the material fit her body well and was also easy to wash. Ambul didn't know what to say, and Min, upon thinking it through, said Achan that she already sounded like an old woman for talking about fabrics and washing clothes. Then something occurred to the guy, and he smiled. At that moment, he said she talked like a lady, and he asked her if she was doing it on purpose so that he would deny it, which left her a little confused. He didn't know if he was wrong, but seeing her reaction, he noticed that she cared more than he thought. She seemed adorable for someone her age, although deep down he said it because he wanted to get revenge. Min got a little worried because technically, if they analyzed it, she would be considered an Amiona. For his part, Ambul didn't feel as young as she thought. For Min, she wasn't lying to him since she had already reached that stage of her life, and also, married women can be called Amuna. Ambul couldn't quite believe what he was hearing until he realized it wasn't a joke. Then he wanted to know if all that had been just a doubt or if she was really playing with him. Min acknowledged that he didn't know since he was new to the building, but confirmed that she was married. The guy could only wonder in his mind if it was true. Was that person he had been with during the mass really married? He felt that everything around him was beginning to crumble. So the guy told Min that she could have told him before, because who would do all that without mentioning they were married? She was confused, although Ambul, in his mind, felt he was in trouble. He didn't know if she would sue him. He doubted if he could get away with claiming he didn't know Min was married. Now, Min doesn't understand, but she supposes she should have explained herself better. She hoped he wouldn't worry, even though it was true that she was married. That didn't mean she was at that moment. That idea stayed with the guy, who remembered those words while noticing that she said it with a very lonely expression. Now he understands why. Then he started yelling at her that she should have started there because she scared him. Anyone could misinterpret something like that. Of course, since he was annoyed and Min was laughing, that just made him angrier. A little later, when the barbecue started, the girls were happy to see so much food. For Jisoo, however, the last time she had tasted anything was when she accompanied Ambul. The redhead was singing. While the guy enjoyed his drink, Yoonseo was muttering that she had a problem, and Min, upon noticing her concern, asked her why she wasn't eating. She hoped she didn't feel lonely, although Yoonseo mentioned that she didn't have much of an appetite. She didn't explain her situation very well, but her smile was visibly distressed. Min wanted to make sure she ate well, especially in moments like that. Jisoo recommended she have some soda to feel better. Both girls were looking out for a CEO. Seeing them like that, Ambul thought that they looked like a mother and an older sister taking care of a child. The redhead, upon noticing his gaze, gave him a small kick and whispered if he was jealous or if he wanted her to feed him too. Ambul just smiled and told her to forget about it. A little later, the guy offered Min his spot in front of the grill, hoping she would stop worrying and eat since he had a lot of experience in barbecue restaurants. Jisoo also wanted her to get away from there and join her with the drink, though Min preferred she leave that alone or else she wouldn't even be able to get up the next day. She was already confusing her words, but Jisoo was only on her first bottle when Min asked if they too had plans for the next day. The redhead mentioned they were just going to explore a cafe, which took Min by surprise, although she then seemed a little uneasy. So Min asked when they had planned that outing or if it was something they agreed on at the park. Still, she congratulated them, assuming they were dating or in the getting to know each other stage. The redhead just looked away, because it seemed like too much since this time she had paid him to act as her boyfriend. Min wanted to know if she hadn't promised she wouldn't do that again. Jisoo thought maybe there was a small misunderstanding. Min was left reflecting, while Jisoo, in her mind, felt it was very embarrassing. But there was no other alternative. After all, Ambul said he didn't have time to go out, and even if she invited him on a date where he didn't have to spend anything, he would probably reject her. That's why she couldn't say much. At that moment, Min reminded the redhead of what she herself had said, that she was clearly older than her. Still, whether they went out or not, whether they had feelings or not, whatever defined their relationship didn't matter as long as both of them were fine. Jisoo agreed with her, although for Min, in general, that shouldn't be relevant, except when it came to continuing to pay for dates that way. She asked her to please stop doing it. Jisoo didn't say anything at that moment, but wished that Min wouldn't exaggerate. It wasn't like she asked for dates all the time. To which Min replied that maybe that was true for now, but what if it happened again in the future? Would that be the last time she would ask Ambul to be her escort in exchange for money? Not even she believed it when she saw how she behaved. It was evident that Jisoo didn't always keep her promises. Even though she had said she wouldn't ask Ambul to go out with her again, she did it almost immediately. She told the redhead that she understood that she was at that stage where she wanted to go out, but then she should just ask for it. There was no reason to base her relationship on money. She reminded her that she herself had said that between them there were no feelings, but they could still get along and have fun. If she continued to develop that strange habit of spending her money that way, she would have problems later on. That was something that even Jisoo, deep down, didn't fully understand. Still, she asked Min why everything was against her. Had she asked her for anything? Min had even done the same. That's why she felt she had no right to scold her. But the landlady was telling her this because she was genuinely worried. She didn't understand why Jisoo reacted with anger. For the redhead, she knew how to handle her own affairs and hoped that Min would leave her alone. Something that, from Min's point of view, wasn't true, since she wasn't handling the situation well. For Jisoo, when she told her everything from the beginning, Min didn't say much, so she didn't understand why she was lecturing her now. But Min clarified that she herself explained to her that Ambyul was pretending to be her boyfriend to help her, and that's why she accepted, because she knew she needed him, and she didn't say anything, although deep down she suspected they were hiding the topic of the dates from her. However, if she had known it would go so far, she would have warned her at that moment, acknowledging that it was her mistake not to do so. She didn't expect the redhead to spend so much money that way, although Jisoo didn't understand what she was referring to. Anyone would think she had taken out a loan to give all her money to Ambyul. She would only ask for his help when she really needed it, for she had limits and managed her own money. For Min, it was funny, since it was she who suggested she open a savings account, something that Jisoo, although she didn't do it at the time, was trying on her own. Min noticed her effort, but the problem was that she planned to spend that saved money on meaningless dates, which deeply bothered her. The offended redhead asked her what the difference was with her if she had also spent money going out with Ambyul. For Min, the difference was that she didn't do it with the intention of having a date. For Jisoo, that made it even worse because Min did it to get rid of him. She had heard everything. She invited him out to evaluate whether he was a strange guy or not. She even pointed out that both the date and the mask were mediocre, and that's why she didn't kick him out. Besides, she had already mentioned that Ambyul wasn't a bad person, and that she shouldn't kick him out of the house. So why spend money on testing people? And if all that had already passed, why did she insist so much on talking about the topic? Because the guy was a terrible person for dates and consecrations, but that proved that at least he wasn't a fool who played with girls. If she had been in his place, she would have already left the house crying. Min admitted that she did something unfair to the guy, and that's why she was honest about everything. Of course, Jisoo felt as if she was throwing reproach after reproach at her. If Min knew it was wrong, then why did she do it? That enraged Min, who exclaimed that it wasn't something she had wanted to do. That she also didn't enjoy doing suspicious things to test others, but Ambyul seemed very strange to her, and she had to make sure. In the end, it turned out that he wasn't like that, but what would have happened if Ambyul had bad intentions? If that were the case, both the CEO and the redhead would have been deceived and would be ruined. Jisoo didn't understand why Min was so overprotective, almost like a mother. She wanted to give an example. If she were really her mom, would it be normal to hit a guy just to prove he was dangerous, only because he approached her daughter? That made it clear in the air that both of them were on the defensive. Ambyul tried to intervene to get them to calm down a bit, but the two girls told him not to get involved in that matter, which annoyed him a little. At that moment, Yoonseo asked if it was true that if she paid him, he would act as her boyfriend, since she had money and could give it to him. That's why she asked him to please pretend to be her partner, which left both Ambyul and the girls who were arguing bewildered. After that, Ambyul says that thanks to Yoonseo, starting a scene with a very awkward atmosphere, the fight between the two girls and the meeting of the dizzy people came to an end. So he tried to go rest for a while. Although that night, Min asked him for help, because from what she had heard from Yoonseo, they were going through a complicated situation. She told him not to worry, that she would not spare in giving him additional money to what Yoonseo would offer him, but she wanted to know if he would do her that favor. Ambyul accepted since it wasn't something that bothered him. But at that moment, he started thinking. He wanted to ask Min if Yoonseo and Jisoo had some kind of special bond with her, but Min didn't understand what he was referring to. He explained that Jisoo had mentioned that normally you don't go so far just to check something like that. And besides, the fact that Min was willing to pay for Yoonseo didn't give the impression that they were just tenants and a manager. That made Min reflect. Although she introduced herself as the manager, she didn't feel they had a special relationship, but regardless of what they decided, she, for her part, valued them deeply. That was the relationship they shared, which left Ambyul speechless. Min asked him to take care of Yoonseo, and with that, she left the room. But for him, Min was someone quite imposing. Later, we see the guy directly ask Yoonseo why she needed to hire a boyfriend for rent. She replied that she needed help with something to be able to go face someone in person. She responded that she needed help with something in order to go face someone in person. Then the guy wanted to know what she was talking about. She, Yoonseo, began to explain that she wrote web novels, But throughout that last project, a guy with nothing better to do wouldn't stop leaving her hate comments. For her, it was normal to receive 1 or 2 messages like that, so at first she just ignored them. But that user didn't miss a single day until the final chapter. In that last one, he crossed the line with his attacks. For Yoon-seo, it was quite annoying. How was she supposed to deal with that? She wasn't the only one he was driving crazy, but in the end, since she couldn't stand it anymore, it ended in an argument in the comments. And of course, they kept throwing responses at each other. It was then that she went too far and called him a loser for hiding behind a screen. While both of them insulted each other nonstop, everything ended in a challenge to face each other, face to face. She wasn't one to back down, but when the time came, she realized it could be dangerous. Still, it wasn't like she could back out, so that's why she went to ask Ambul for help. The guy was left speechless. She confirmed that she was a writer and that she published on a subscription platform where she earned, based on her views, although Ambul didn't fully understand it. The girl received around 1 million wons for him. Now he knew that she worked while she studied, and that seemed admirable to him, even more so considering that although she was a little younger than him, she strived to get by on her own. Earning her own money was worthy of respect. Since she was already an adult, he supposed she would know how to solve her own problems. Although, Yoon-seo stayed quiet and wanted to know what he was referring to. For Ambul, it wasn't like she needed him, so he asked if he could leave. However, she yelled at him that he couldn't do that because he had said he would help her. She wanted to know why he had changed his mind at that moment. For him, it was all because the girl at that time seemed to be throwing a tantrum, so he had no choice but to offer her his help. He didn't know that would be the topic. He wasn't her bodyguard or anything like that. What was he gonna do, fight for her? He didn't see the point in that, and if she was scared, she'd better not leave her room. Still, Yoon-seo wasn't asking him to fight, just to be by her side, something that Ambul couldn't understand. Why would she need him to stay there in the first place? Then, while he tried to say something, Yoon-seo gathered enough courage to admit that the person who bothered her was a gloomy loser just like her, which left the guy speechless. Yoon-seo continued saying that when she read his comments, she noticed it. She was sure he was a hikikomori, someone capable of saying anything to people like him, who are so sociable. That's why, behind a computer, he could let out whatever he wanted without consequences. That started to worry Ambul. Although he still didn't fully understand what she was talking about, he said that he wouldn't do anything, but at that moment, Yoon-seo grabbed his leg. She was willing to give him all her money with the condition that he help her, although the guy didn't have a problem with the money, he just didn't want to do it. However, she didn't plan to let him go until he agreed to help her. Later, Ambul told everything that had occurred. He was going to use his day off to accompany Yoon-seo when Jisoo wanted to know what he meant by helping her. He seemed quite uncomfortable, but explained that he was going to accompany her to a kind of confrontation with someone, because that was what she had asked him to do, and she didn't take no for an answer. Of course, the redhead apologized for being distracted and not having heard half of it, but she could only sigh. Still, Ambul asked her if she didn't like the place they had gone to. For Jisoo, it wasn't that. The decoration was like in the photos, everything was nice and good, but she suddenly stopped, which left the guy intrigued. She, showing a little discomfort, admitted that she was thinking about other things and couldn't concentrate. Then her expression changed to one of concern. She continued saying that she felt that maybe she had been a little harsh and that she should apologize, but she had no intention of thinking about what they had talked about again, and that's why it was difficult for her to do it. Ambul understood that she was referring to the discussion she had with Min the day before. Still, Jisoo could only sigh and apologized again. She had been distracted with other matters since. She asked him for help. She asked him if he preferred to end their date for that day, and for him, if that was the case, it would be best to go home early to rest. However, Jisoo showed indifference and told him that she didn't want to go back yet. This confused the guy, but she admitted that before leaving, she wanted to rest a little, in another place. Then Ambul, who had been worried about her all day, felt strangely happy when she asked him to accompany her to the bathtub. Still, he wondered if it wasn't strange to sit there without saying anything. He was waiting for one of them to speak. At that moment, Jisoo asked if they should leave now, which left the guy surprised. For him, not much time had passed since they arrived, which made the girl right. Although deep down, he kept thinking that since they sat there in silence, it was as if she was trying to say something but couldn't. It was then that, guided by what he imagined, he leaned in and gave her a small kiss on the neck. Jisoo wanted to know why he did that. He could only laugh while apologizing. Since he was looking at her, he felt like kissing her. That made her blush. She commented that he was a fool who was always trying to win over women. The guy was confused, but she told him not to respond while she gave him a kiss on the cheek. That made Ambul the one who was now blushing, and he asked if they should start the mass. to which the redhead wanted to know why he was thinking of praying in that place, and not just waiting until they got to the other room. Although he didn't quite understand her words, he asked her how she could make that observation if she was being so affectionate. That was something that Jisoo didn't want to admit. Before starting with everything, for her, it was a bit uncomfortable to pray in that place. But the guy could only smile. For him, they could leave there if she wanted, but Jisoo denied it. She said it was fine, especially because it was a warm place where she didn't have to worry about anything else. She even said that she could allow herself to be a little more selfish. She wanted to know if, being a little smaller and more compact, he wouldn't find her annoying. But Ambul, upon noticing it, realized that they were the same height, although according to Jisoo, she was just a little shorter than him. Just when the guy was about to guess her height, she covered his mouth and said that she measured 1.70 meters. She hoped that wasn't a problem for him, which left him speechless. She wanted to know why he was making that face, or if he didn't believe her, for she was telling the truth. But then she became insecure. She wanted to know if he liked girls like Min, who was smaller and more adorable in comparison to someone as tall as she was. The guy could only smile. He wanted to know what she was talking about, or if it was a hint for him to tell her how cute she was, which made the redhead blush even more. He told her not to worry, that just by looking at her, he could already tell how adorable she was. Still, he didn't plan to stop the ceremony. He had been wondering how to cheer her up since she had been in a bad mood all day. He just wanted her to stay calm, being adorable, and let herself be guided by the path of God with the hope that she would find a little peace. Jisoo smiled, accepting. A little later, Ambul was reading the Bible, although he noticed that the girl wanted to take a break, so he proposed to finish the consecration quickly, which she accepted. That's why he began to read the paragraphs faster, even praying more quickly. Ambul was honest, they had been praying for quite a while, and it was already getting difficult even for him. That's why they would have to take a break before continuing from where they left off, to which Jisoo agreed. A little later, they continued with their business, although the redhead commented that if they continued to purify their deepest sins, it was something so positive that she might even receive a divine revelation that made the guy smile, since she still seemed nervous every time they attended mass. But despite that, she had been having very cute reactions for a while, although he knew that also made her look a little uneasy. She told him to be quiet. Still, he noticed that she kept responding, and although she seemed calm, he was going to stop praying if she continued like that. Since he noticed she was a little uncomfortable, Jisoo warned him not to even think about leaving, or she swore she would end him. This made the guy laugh since he saw no reason to get so upset, although she grumbled, saying that it was he who started making fun of her. That made him smile, and he apologized because he couldn't help it when he saw how adorable her reactions were, but he wanted to know if he could let it go just for that time. That made the girl blush, and she asked him to hurry up and use the holy water. So the guy listened to her and went straight to purify her soul, though she complained that it took him an eternity. A little later, for her, it was great to be able to rest after the mass, though Ambul was quick to make fun of her, saying she sounded like an old person when she said that. Still, he seemed happy and wanted to know if she felt better now. Jisoo simply blushed, thanking him, since he didn't have to worry so much, for it wasn't his fault. Although the guy was thoughtful because, despite that, he hoped she had had a good time, especially because they were on a date. He wanted them to be able to return home feeling happy. The redhead also remained thoughtful, as a doubt came to her mind about what he had told her before about not having time because he was focused on earning money. She wanted to know why he needed so much money. Although the question was sudden, she hoped he would answer. Ambul seemed a little worried, since it was a long story, so he thought of summarizing it for her. Still, he didn't know how to explain it well. He guessed you could say he had a debt, but he asked her not to misunderstand. He's never been an overspender, nor has he made risky investments, or, much less, gambled. He doesn't have businesses or anything like that. He simply has a debt for a pretty silly reason. Jisoo understood that it must be something serious. Even so, he smiled, because thanks to a certain person, lately, he has been earning a decent amount. He believes he'll be able to pay off what he owes sooner than he imagined. But the girl wanted to know what he would do once he finished paying everything off. For him, he's not sure. Maybe enjoy life a little, which is the most likely thing. Then she wanted to know if he would have a girlfriend. He was confused, but she commented that it would be better to find one soon instead of waiting, while she bit his cheek. He asked her what she was doing. The redhead apologized, saying she just wanted to leave a memory, though for her it was much more complicated than she thought. He wanted to know for what purpose, to which she replied that she was marking what belonged to her. Upon this, Jisoo smiled and asked him what he was looking at or if he had a clear idea or not, because if he was going to get a girlfriend, he already had her right in front of him. This left the guy confused, who wanted to know if she was asking him out. When she nodded, for him it was sudden, So he was pensive for a moment, since he wanted to ask her something first. He wanted to know if she really felt something for him that made her blush, but at the same time, show an expression of annoyance. She commented that she suddenly felt like hitting him, especially because he seemed to expect her to reject him or not feel anything for her. After she had gathered the courage to confess, he came out with silly questions. She had made a confession to him, and he acted as if he didn't understand anything, although he just wanted her to calm down. When everything finally calmed down, Jisoo was still a bit annoyed. While Ambul seemed a little awkward, still, he asked her to remember when she invited him out. Of course, Jisoo didn't even want to remember the expression he had. For the guy, hearing her say that it was the first time someone had treated her like that, even if he was pretending to be her boyfriend, was something he enjoyed a lot, because when she invited him out, he thought it was just about pretending again like the last time. That's why he asked her if she felt something for him, if she wanted a real relationship, because he wanted to continue feeling everything she had mentioned. He assumed they were going out without any real feelings between them. The girl understood that, since looking at it that way, she understood why he thought that way, but she also clarified that she wasn't so cunning. That impressed Ambul, since he believed that people usually acted like that, although for him, that only showed that there was something strange about him. Still, Ambul didn't see it as a common thing, but also not a bad one, because he didn't think he would end up being liked by someone. It was something that anyone would like, to be treated with affection and care. The redhead confessed that if he had been the one to confess, she might have liked that, but with her being the one to do it, it felt strange. There were even guys on the street who tried to get a number, or at least see the face of someone they liked. But if she didn't feel anything for him, then why would she ask him out and treat her like a princess? It was a crazy idea. The guy was pensive for a moment, not knowing how everything had gotten to that point, although for Jisoo, he was the one complicating things. Then Ambul, curious, wanted to ask her one more question. He wanted to know what she liked about him. Despite thinking about it, she wasn't clear. When he asked her why she had told him she liked him, she confirmed it, but admitted she didn't know exactly why. That left the guy speechless. But Jisoo continued to explain that she has thought about it many times, but can't fully understand it. She supposes that maybe it was because of how kind and considerate he was with her during the first consecration, or because it was so fun to go out with him, or maybe because of his face. No matter how much she thinks about it, she can't find something concrete to explain why she likes him. Although he seemed a little skeptical, he wanted to know if she could at least describe what she felt, to which the girl replied that it depended on how you looked at it, but in the end, what was important was the other person. She asked him if he remembered when she felt bad after mistakenly believing that he and Min were together. Seeing his face, that day when he went to look for her, she truly felt it. Upon understanding that everything had been a misunderstanding, she couldn't avoid it anymore. Without realizing it, she had fallen in love with him, and even saying it as a joke, she called him garbage. That made the guy blush, which caused Jisoo to laugh, since she was looking for exactly that reaction. However, Ambul commented that he needed some time to think about all of that. For Yoonseo, she didn't want him to feel pressured. As she had already told him, she understood that he was not in a position to start a relationship at that moment. She only hoped that he would remember her when he managed to pay off his debt and had more free time. Although for him, he felt that making her wait that long was not fair, and he didn't want that to bother her. The redhead thanked him, since she was enjoying what they shared. At that moment, the only thing she was afraid of was that his answer would be a true rejection. If she was being honest, she had considered waiting a little longer before confessing everything to him. Because if she ruined things, everything could end, and maybe they would never talk to each other again. The next day, Yoonseo asked if they were talking to the right person, if it was really that reader who had been bothering her in the comments, but the girl who was in front of them denied that it was her and pointed to who it was. That left both Yoonseo and Ambul confused, since they didn't expect such a malicious comment to come from a child. That woman apologized for the trouble, as she didn't understand where her son had learned to behave like that. She felt she should have raised him better. Ambul understood, since they had also said very hurtful things without knowing it was a child. Meanwhile, Yoonseo didn't understand what had just happened. She had lost her composure and gotten angry with a simple kid. As if that wasn't embarrassing enough, she even brought a fake boyfriend to confront him. She wanted to die of embarrassment, but right at that moment, the child spoke and said to the girl that her writing was a complete mess, leaving Yoonseo completely disconcerted. The child commented that her previous series was fine, but the current one seemed boring to him. He didn't understand how she could write something like that, although he was grateful that it was a web novel. If it had been a physical copy, he would have thrown it in the fire. He said that it wasn't worth wasting paper on something so bad, and that he was embarrassed that trees were being wasted because of it, Therefore, according to him, nowadays gestures were being called writers, and he was worried about how literacy in his country was declining. Her writing seemed overwhelming, but in a bad way. He saw Yunseo as a mediocre author, and said that both the reviews and the number of readers were in free fall. At that, his mother took him by the shoulders and asked her dear little son where he had learned to speak to people like that. Although for the child everything was true, his mother didn't accept excuses. She told him that he must be kind and respectful when expressing himself, just as she taught him. The little one argued that Yunseo had provoked him first, but his mother insisted that he was the one who turned everything into a fight, and that he should always listen to others' opinions before speaking. She warned him that if he continued to behave that way, all his friends would end up walking away. Ambyul and Yunseo agreed that there was no point in continuing to argue. After all, he was just a child, so the mother suggested that if he had something to say, he should do it with respect. But before anything else, he had to apologize to Yunseo. That little one apologized for having said ugly things, although to be honest, he was a fan who was really angry because he didn't like her web novel, her writing style, but didn't understand why she was continuing with that story. He thought that if he left negative reviews, she would start writing something different. Then the girl wanted to know what part he hadn't liked. For the child, the whole context seemed as if she randomly put together popular things without any coherence. It wasn't interesting, and it didn't make sense. The dialogues were stiff, not natural at all. But before he could continue with the risque scenes and how unbelievable the situations were, Yunseo interrupted him. In summary, he felt that there were so many errors that he couldn't find any reason to keep reading. He thought that if she continued to write like that, people would end up believing that she was a fraud who was just looking for money. But despite all those criticisms, the child was frustrated because her previous series had seemed like the most exciting thing he had ever read in his life. He admitted that he had gone too far and was sorry. After that, the boy left, apologizing, and both keyboard warriors said goodbye. But Yunseo had been defeated by an elementary school kid. It was obvious that she was completely dejected. Ambyul didn't want her to take it so personally. In the end, it was all a product of the child's desire to like her story. For Yunseo, that was exactly the problem. The guy wanted to know what was wrong with her. She replied that everything he told her was true, nothing but facts. Although he didn't understand the weight of his words for the girl, the child was completely right. She was a bad writer. She didn't know how to create characters or capture emotions. She felt there was nothing she could do. She had no friends. She was an outcast. She couldn't communicate easily with others. It was no wonder she couldn't write something good. She would starve because she didn't deserve to be called a writer. Ambyul could only sigh since he reminded her that her previous work had been great, and he was sure that the next one would be much better. Although the girl was pensive, she felt that that work hadn't been so exciting, and that the genre was so unique that no one reads it anymore today. That left Ambyul a little pensive because he didn't quite understand what she was referring to, but he was convinced that socializing and spending time with other people could help her, although for her that was no guarantee of anything. She saw it as unlikely since she had no one to talk to so far. Then he reminded her that they were talking right at that moment, leaving the girl a little surprised. He continued, saying that besides him, there were Jisoo and Min. There were several people she could talk to, and he thought that there was a lot of closeness between her and Min, so she could start interacting with those she already had close by. Although Yunseo was considering it, the guy thought to himself that that would be enough to solve the problem. While he was against going at first, Min had asked him to help her, and he really hoped that all of this would be useful to her. It was then that she asked if he could continue acting as her boyfriend a little longer that day. That took him by surprise, as he didn't expect that date to end up being an interview for her novel. But Yunseo, a bit nervous, asked if she could have a consecration with him. That left the guy confused. But she explained that if she had to start interacting with people close to her, and he had promised to help her, then she wanted him to interact with her in a close way. An adult conversation like adults usually have. Since he was popular enough to pass as her fake boyfriend, she had blindly had so many masses that he must already be worn out. She wanted to record that memory for the rest of her life, so she told him to use her soul however he wanted. That's why she asked him to give her an incredible experience that would fill her with peace. When everything ended, her mind would be so full of dopamine that living a normal life would be impossible. She truly wanted that, so that even someone as common as her, who has never written anything rated 18+ in her life, could create a novel so incredible that readers couldn't help but burst with emotion. In his mind, he knew she was completely crazy. A little later, he had to get Yunseo out of there, because staying after that monologue was too embarrassing. Then she refused to go home unless they had a consecration. He couldn't let her keep making a scene in the middle of the street. He did everything in his power. But in the end, they ended up going to a magical town. She didn't know if she should start organizing everything. And it was then that he, smiling, suggested that they just talk. For her, that was completely different from what she had proposed, so she asked why he had brought her to a magical town. He replied that he had never agreed to anything. He only took her there because she was still making a scene, which annoyed Yunseo. She exclaimed, "Then why did you bring me to a place like this? Did you plan to pray with me, or are you just stupid?" Although, in Ambiel's mind, he felt that everything would only get worse the more he got involved. Min had asked him to help her properly, and she looked especially different when she did. He had already supported her with her online problem, so now he had to close that conversation somehow. That's why he asked the girl why she wanted to talk about adult topics so suddenly, or if it was because she was worried about developing deeper and more interesting characters, or maybe she wanted to take the path of adult novels, so she wouldn't have to focus so much on character development. For Yunseo, she felt that it depended on the genre. There were times when imagination became more important than realism. Even indirect experiences also counted as life experiences, but this time it was an experience they could build. Although she seemed nervous, she was honest. She had been playing the guitar while watching things related to mind control, divine revelations, and that kind of entertainment. How was she supposed to create a character that would attract readers if she didn't experience it herself? She knew that their relationship at that moment was a complete mess, as it was not exactly common. They could label their situation as a kind of fantasy, but it would be great if he helped her create an experience. She believed something incredible could come out of all that, a presence that would convey real and lived emotions. Ambiel could only smile, saying that everyone had their own tastes, but she understood that someone could consider her a twisted person, since she didn't find charm in things like pure and sincere love. The guy, for his part, knew that when he understood her preferences, he would know what she wanted, although that didn't mean he was going to do anything. That intrigued Yunseo, who begged him to just help her this one time, but he refused, saying not once, not twice. He hoped they would go home. Even so, the girl didn't seem convinced, and she flatly refused to go back, which left the guy a little worried. Then she started shouting that he was the one who offered to help her from the beginning, and that now he was backing out. How could he do that to her? She had been looking forward to it so much. Or was he torturing her? She felt that with his help, she could write something incredible. Whatever it was, the child from before would continue to leave malicious comments. But if she wrote a good novel that everyone praised, then people would start to fantasize about her work. But Ambiel wanted to know how she could be so sure that she wouldn't receive criticism for changing genres, to which she replied that she was only giving an example, that she was serious. She had been lucky enough to build a fan base, but her last work was bad because she couldn't even live a normal life. Now she had an opportunity to write something fun and interesting. She wanted to grow as a writer. She couldn't pass up that opportunity. She was sure that everyone would praise her new work, and if a god existed, then she would pray for her novels to become a national success. Faced with all that, the guy could only sigh, wishing that she would calm down first, but Yunseo kept insisting that he wouldn't regret it. Every time she saw him at home, she would be screaming in front of his door, begging for a mass because she knew he wouldn't reject her. For Ambiel, if he thought about it, she wouldn't have had so much courage back then. She would have remained the same if she hadn't overcome all those problems. Besides, she was starting to seriously annoy him with that whole situation, so without realizing what he was doing, he ended up kissing the girl, to which Yunseo was impressed. She didn't know what to say, but at that moment, for Ambiel, it was enough for her to stop whining because he would give her exactly what she was looking for. For the girl, that left her speechless. She simply blushed instantly. Although the guy asked her if she didn't want it or why she was reacting like that, she denied it. She could only touch her lips because now she knew what a kiss felt like. And that was exactly what she wanted. That made the guy's cheeks also turn red, although he supposed that none of that could be considered as something relatively normal. That's why she asked him if he was really going to do what she was asking. And he replied yes. For Yunseo, if that was the case, she wanted to know if he could humiliate her in a slightly more severe way, which confused the guy quite a bit. However, she was honest and told him that she had liked the kiss, but she thought it would be interesting to try another approach. She would like him to approach her with a more relaxed attitude, hoping he could understand her. For Ambiel, it was as if he had to forget everything he considered normal. That seemed completely crazy to him. In the end, he ended up carrying the girl. Of course, she thanked him for the gesture, but also asked him to warn her before doing something like that, because it was quite embarrassing. Although when he put her down, she didn't know how to react, which he interpreted as her not wanting to perform the mass, but she denied it. She did want to do it. She was just a little embarrassed. Ambiel was also worried, so he decided to go slowly to organize everything. Although she preferred that he not get too close. More than anything, because she was still very self-conscious. For him, it was difficult to know how to act with her. She had told him that she wanted to have a ceremony and even that he should treat her like garbage, but now she was acting very indecisive. So he thought that if she really didn't want to do it, she should just tell him and they could go home to rest. Although Yoon-seo tried to say something, the guy was already quite confused. Out of embarrassment, she didn't either. She knew what to say. But she gathered the courage to blurt out that he stank, although she clarified that she wasn't talking about him, but about her, as she had been hot and had sweated a lot and surely smelled bad. Besides, she was covering herself because she didn't like anything about her body. That's why she wanted to take a shower before starting the mass. Although Ambyul didn't know how to respond, he didn't give up on his attempt to organize the consecration. For him, even if she smelled a little like sweat, it wasn't that serious. So he didn't want to waste any more time and preferred to go ahead with what they were supposed to do. Of course, she was too shy about everything, but he didn't want to continue overthinking the matter. However, now she thought he was trying to humiliate her. He admitted that he wasn't an expert on that and didn't pretend to be a professional. So he asked her to tell him right away if he should stop the preparations before it was too late. To that, Yoon-seo simply asked him to continue with it. Ambyul took one of the loaves of bread she was carrying. For her, it was important to know how they looked, since they should at least show some appreciation if they were going to do something like that. Although the guy looked at her with curiosity, he noted that she was quite demanding, something that she liked because she wanted to know everything. She was interested in knowing what men thought when they participated in a mass, if it was strange to have that opportunity to learn how they worked, or why they were always interested in certain aspects of women, to which Ambyul could respond that her feelings were quite pleasant, an unmatched warmth, but he didn't know how to explain beyond that. For her, having a more detailed explanation would be nice, adding that she was excited about the idea of having a ceremony with him when he saw her so beautiful or something like that, since she would like him to be more descriptive with what he did or thought. The guy was quite intrigued by her words. Although he noticed that her faith was increasing, he commented that she was so beautiful that he wished to have a consecration with her at that very moment. However, that confused Yoon-seo even more, who told him that if he was going to say something like that, he should at least do it with sincerity. He apologized, as all of that was new to him. He had never been with someone so crazy as to enjoy being humiliated. Of course, she clarified that it wasn't about humiliating her, she just wanted him to be a little more descriptive with his words, or maybe just to curse her. For him, she seemed quite demanding, considering that she was the one who asked to have a mass when she could have prayed without worrying about anything else. So he didn't understand why she was asking for so much. It was starting to annoy him. For the girl, his words left her a little surprised. But after thinking about it for a moment, she realized that it was exactly what she was hoping for, that he would scold her, just as he complained about her. That was exactly what she needed. He had to keep acting like he was reprimanding her, while Ambyul just thought about going home. A little later, Yoon-seo asked the guy if he was enjoying the loaves of bread, but she also wanted to know if he could talk to her like before. He noticed that she was going on with her speech again. He didn't understand how she could talk so calmly while trying to hide her sins, so he looked at her with indifference. Then, Yoon-seo asked him why he was looking at her that way, and he replied that he was just thinking about what he could say to scold her. That made the girl smile, since she didn't expect him to actually listen to her. For her, that was something wonderful. It's not every day that one has the opportunity she was giving him. However, the guy simply leaned back in his personality for a moment and noticed that she seemed to be sweating more than before. He asked her if she was hot, although maybe it was just nerves. In reality, he was just playing the game. She so desired, since she cared so much about her body odor, and in the end, it turned out that it had been all about her all along. That bothered Yoon-seo, as she felt that he shouldn't make fun of others. Insecurities. Not even a demon would do something like that. Still, the guy thought that by her reaction, he was doing exactly what she wanted, since she looked cute when she got flustered. But she wasn't referring to that kind of punishment. It wasn't what she expected so much, so she warned him that she was going to tell Min what he was saying, but before she could start threatening him, the guy began to do a jutsu to calm her soul. He reminded her that just as she wanted to do what she wanted, he was also going to play along. Although Yoon-seo clearly asked him to stop his technique because it was bothering her, she wanted him to start praying once and for all. Ambyul felt that it was time to start the prayers, but as he knew it would be her first mass, he asked her to let him know if she felt pain in her heart, as he would make sure to do everything in a clean and orderly way. Of course, Yoon-seo wondered if a chalice should be so resplendent, or if it shouldn't look more dull, as in webtoons. Then she asked the guy if they were really going to have a ceremony with that. Ambyul, without paying attention, began with his first prayer, but without realizing it, he read the entire first paragraph in one go. That made Yoon-seo feel that barely starting the ceremony, she was already beginning to release a little of her sins. Although she had heard that her heart could hurt, As soon as she heard it, she felt an intense warmth in her soul, a very strange sensation that she couldn't stand. Ambul seemed a little worried, but for him, if everything was going well, he didn't have to say anything. For Yunseo, she had made the right decision in choosing him because, to be honest, at first, she did get annoyed when he made fun of her smell, but she understood once he started with his prayers. She understood that a ceremony could be crazy. Now she understood why it was not strange for him to have so many women around him. Of course, Ambul clarified that it wasn't like he did that kind of thing all the time, but she knew he was just being modest. Since she witnessed when her juniors fought over him, she had heard everything. She also knew that he didn't cheat on girls, even if they paid him to pretend to be their boyfriend. For her, the mass turned out to be more incredible than she imagined, that he would have consecrations with women just for being good at it, and on top of that, getting paid for it. It was like something out of a manga or a novel. That kind of story was already a classic. For her, he was a guy with such a fragile chalice that he managed to leave girls completely at peace, both in heart and soul. It was then that the guy felt he had rested enough, and that it was time to continue where they had left off. At that moment, we see a thought from Yunseo, who described herself as a 20-year-old woman, a university student, and a novice writer. Her goal was to write intense religious novels, so she sought help from someone with experience and quite popular around her. And right now, she was experiencing her most corrupt sins for the first time in real time as a faithful follower. She had even recommended having a ceremony to all her audience. That's why she asked Ambul to read even faster. For her, describing a mass was something quite curious. Now she understood why girls like her could find peace through prayers. However, the guy suddenly stopped his praises. When she asked him why, he explained that no matter what he did, it seemed she liked everything, and that didn't help her release her anger. So something occurred to him, and he asked the girl to hold a small fragment of a book herself, although she didn't know how to do it very well. Ambul watched her carefully. Since she had asked him to be faster during the ceremony, he hoped that now she wouldn't complain, especially because she was already getting on his nerves. For him, it was absurd that she would beg him for a mass in the middle of so many people, and on top of that, make fun of him as if he were a rag doll. How is it possible that she spoke to him like that? He asked her if that was the way she treated someone who was doing her a favor. Of course, she didn't understand why he was scolding her. She thought that what she had said was practically a compliment, although Ambul didn't want her to respond. He just wanted her to repeat a simple, "I'm sorry." Then Yunseo could barely whisper in, "I'm sorry," which was a relief for him, but seeing her so embarrassed, he wanted to completely revitalize her soul so she could feel grateful. She sincerely thanked him for his goodwill and asked him to help her as much as possible. With that, the guy quickly went for the holy water to revitalize her soul. When he moved away for a moment to rest, she mentioned that when he got angry and scolded her like that, she was finally able to see something authentic that she liked. Then she asked him if it wasn't too much trouble to repeat the consecration in the same way, although that took the guy by surprise. He simply denied the possibility of continuing. Then the girl wanted to know why. He replied that they were already done, that it was time to go home, and that one ceremony was more than enough. However, Yunseo insisted on having one more. In the end, they reached an agreement. She could only clean the chalice to remove the deepest stains. For her, that was perfect, since it was something she had already seen in mangas, and since she had the opportunity, she wanted to try everything she could. The guy simply sighed, but he told her that if she was going to do it, she should do it before he went to take a bath. Because of that, Yunseo decided to take care of everything and do her best. However, when she started cleaning the chalice, she noticed something strange. Of course, Ambul had to guide her to remove the deepest stains, so he took her hands to show her where to place everything she was looking for in order for the chalice to shine, although he noticed that she was having a hard time. In the end, he set the chalice aside. For him, he didn't understand why she had insisted on doing something so reckless. For her part, Yunseo felt she had no other choice. How could she waste an opportunity like that? The experience she was living was unmatched, although of course, to her relief, nothing else happened, but Ambul couldn't help but think that she was quite crazy. A little later, Ambul was thinking of explaining to Min, in an appropriate way, everything that had happened that day, but if Yunseo started saying weird things, he would get into trouble, so he hoped she wouldn't say anything, to which she agreed. However, noticing that she wasn't talking anymore, and how focused she was, he asked her what she had been writing with such enthusiasm for a while. Yunseo replied that she was writing down in a memo everything that could be useful to her after what she had experienced that day. But she was immediately startled to notice that he was watching her, and asked him why he was spying on her. Although he didn't want her to misunderstand, he just said that he was curious. She reminded him that she was writing the most important thing, since she wouldn't have another opportunity in the future to experience something like that again. Besides, she mentioned that she had said it from the beginning of the ceremony. That led Ambule to think that it was all an excuse to justify her twisted ideas. She looked at him a little annoyed. Because if they left her ideas aside, she wasn't so crazy as to want a mass for no reason, although for Ambule, it wasn't normal for someone to say that. He wanted to know if in her industry, it was common to live a fictional situation firsthand to write about it. The girl just looked at him with disbelief. His question seemed silly to her, or rather, as if he thought she was naive. Because if he put it that way, fantasy writers should learn to throw fireballs before writing novels. Clearly what Ambule was saying and what he was doing didn't make any sense, although she seemed a little worried. She admitted to being a terrible novice, and that's why she wanted to try anything that could help her, since she was an ikokomori, with few chances of having a boyfriend or social experiences. She thought that since she had the opportunity, it was better to take advantage of it and live an experience that would help her write. This made the protagonist sigh, noting that she liked writing so much that she was able to try anything as long as it helped her. Although Yunseo also thought about it. She wasn't so sure. Writing wasn't something she really enjoyed lately, but it wasn't something she could give up just because it had stopped seeming fun to her, to which Ambule wondered if it wouldn't be more logical to just quit. He didn't even know what to say to her anymore, but in the end, his conversation with Yunseo ended at that moment, and a little later they got home. They had gone through an exhausting day in many ways, so he thought about relaxing a bit before sleeping. But he knew that wasn't possible, since resting peacefully in that house was almost impossible. When he went with Min, he noticed that there was a lot of food in front of him. Although he thought she had called him to dinner, Min assumed he hadn't eaten yet, and she also wanted to talk to him a little. Although that worried the guy, he wanted to know what Min wanted to tell him. But she asked him to eat first or else the food would get cold. While he was eating, he felt he was about to choke. At that moment, Min thanked him, although she also asked him to eat more slowly. However, noticing how nervous she was, he wanted to know why she had called him. Min thanked him again, which made him feel a little guilty. Still, Min seemed worried, as she reminded him of the question she once asked him. What is his relationship with Yunseo and Jisoo? For her, she saw them as if they were her family, which confused Ambule, but she ended up confirming it. Since they lived in the same house, sometimes they ate together, and when they needed help, she always supported them. If that wasn't a family, then she didn't know what else it could be. Ambule didn't know what to respond, but she started to laugh, as if she could read what he was thinking, that he surely saw her as someone weird or acting strangely. Still, she ended up smiling at him. She explained that in reality, she was just the person in charge of the house, and that they were the tenants who stayed there, but they got along well, although they weren't a family as such. For her, they were still very important people. Ambule understood, and while Min looked at him with a smile, she admitted that, seriously, they were all as valuable as a family. That's why she thanked the guy for all his help. He gave a nervous laugh and started to say that if she wanted, he could tell her why Yunseo asked him to pretend to be her boyfriend. However, Min denied that it was necessary. Although she was curious to know what problem led her to need him so urgently, she also understood that it was part of Yunseo's privacy. That's why she preferred to trust that she had handled it well. Ambule affirmed that everything had gone well, which made Min smile, who asked him to continue eating before his food got cold. Seeing him enjoy it made her happy that at least he was in a good mood. A little later, an audio recording from the cafeteria was playing, where Yunseo could be heard directly asking Ambule to have a mass with her. The person listening was Min, who put her phone aside and wondered what Yunseo was thinking when making a request like that. She could only sigh at that moment, but upon thinking about it better, she hoped Ambule could understand her point of view. She didn't want to throw out Yunseo, if she could avoid it, although she wished she would behave with more discretion. On the other hand, Jisoo asked Ambule how his day had gone. He tried to act clueless, but he only thought it had been one problem after another. She was referring to the fight that Yunseo was supposedly going to have with another person, or if everything had gone well and there had been no inconvenience. Although the boy was about to say something, in his mind he didn't know how to handle it, since he didn't like lying to Jisoo, but the redhead thought they had fought and that he ended up being hit. This took Ambule by surprise, since he now understood why she looked so down. She wanted to know if they hadn't hurt him, but he denied that was the case. Just at that moment, Yunseo entered the room and asked the boy to let her take the chalice, once again leaving both of them speechless. Yunseo explained that while she was taking notes before, he kept talking to her, and she didn't manage to write down everything she felt, so she didn't remember it well. That's why she hoped to be able to see the chalice again. But upon noticing who was there, and noticing Jisoo's gloomy look, she felt she had put her foot in her mouth. She ran out of the place, hoping to return later. Still, Jesu remained there, waiting for an explanation. It seemed that Ambyul had not only gone to help Yoonseo in her personal duel, but something else had happened. Suddenly, Jesu herself also felt like taking notes, and that's why she wanted to know exactly what had happened during that duel. When Ambyul finished telling what happened, he looked quite restless, so he asked Jesu if she was upset, although she denied it, saying she wasn't. However, for him, it was obvious that she was, since he could notice it on her face. Even so, the girl's expression changed at that instant, which worried him even more. After letting out a sigh, Jisoo told him that she didn't want him to make that face as he hadn't done anything wrong. Besides, they weren't dating, so she couldn't demand anything from him. But for Ambyul, hearing her sigh, that was as if he had committed an unforgivable fault. Jisoo commented that all of this was quite frustrating, and asked him to get up for a moment, although she hoped he wouldn't take long. When the boy got to his feet, she simply hugged him. This took him by surprise, but she asked him to hug her back. So Ambyul, not knowing quite how to react, did so. The redhead said nothing more. When she separated from him, she said that was enough. She had to go to sleep, and he also needed to rest. She just wished the protagonist good night. And upon leaving the room, Ambyul couldn't help but let out a low curse. He didn't understand why, but he felt like he was gonna die from guilt. On the other hand, Jisoo, being honest with herself, knew that Ambyul hadn't done anything wrong. Furthermore, he wasn't her partner, so he had the right to have a mass with whoever he wanted. She was clear about that. She had told him not to feel pressured, but deep down it mattered to her. It affected her that his confession had left her thinking, and that was what made her feel uncomfortable, as if she were begging for his attention. She could only curse herself because she knew that all of this was not right. The next morning, while Ambyul was still sleeping, a sound began to slowly wake him from sleep. He heard Jisoo's voice asking if he had woken up yet. He sat up somewhat confused and asked her what she was doing there. Although she was still cleaning the chalice, she admitted that she didn't remember very well what that was called, but that according to her, it was a morning cleaning. Ambyul, still bewildered, wanted to know why she was suddenly doing that, to which the girl replied that he should lower his voice, or the others might hear them.